Do you ever wonder if the magic we chase so frantically today is the same magic we left behind so quietly yesterday? Hello, my old friends. It's good of you to join me again here by the warmth of the fire. Pull up a chair, stay a while. The flames in this old hearth have a way of talking, you know. They don't use words, of course. They speak in whispers of heat and flickers of light, dancing and weaving stories for anyone patient enough to watch. And I have become a very patient man. I sit here in my favorite chair, the one with the worn leather that knows the shape of my bones better than I do, and I watch two worlds at once. Around me is the world of now. It is a world of breathtaking sound and light. My great-grandson Leo is sitting on the floor, not 10 feet away from me, but he might as well be on a different planet. His face, so young and full of life, is bathed in the shifting electric blue glow of a television screen that takes up half the wall. On it, dragons made of starlight battle chrome-plated knights in a landscape so real, so impossibly detailed, it makes my old eyes water just trying to take it all in. The sounds from it are a symphony of crashes, digital roars, and synthesized music that feels both epic and strangely hollow. My granddaughter, Sarah, Leo's mother, is on the sofa, her own face illuminated by the smaller, gentler glow of her telephone. She's smiling at something on that little rectangle of glass. A message from a friend, perhaps. A video of a cat playing a tiny piano. I don't know. Her thumbs move in a silent, impossibly fast dance across the screen. She is here, but she is also somewhere else. They are all here. The room is full of my family, full of love, full of the comfortable chaos of Christmas Eve. There are presents piled so high under the tree, they create their own mountain range of shimmering paper and perfectly tied bows. The boxes whisper of expensive gadgets, of things that will connect them to a million strangers across the globe, of toys that whir and beep and speak in pre-recorded voices. The air hums with the energy of it all. It is a vibrant, dazzling, wonderful Christmas. And yet, as I watch the firelight play across their distracted faces, I feel a gentle, familiar pull, a tug on the sleeve of my memory. The fire leaps, a sudden bright flare of orange and gold, and just like that, I am no longer entirely in this room. I am living in the echo of another. It makes me think of a Christmas a long, long time ago. A time when the brightest screen in the entire house was the fire itself, and the only things that beeped were the smoke detector when my wife, Eleanor, left the rolls in the oven a minute too long. I'm thinking of the Christmas of 1993. 1993. It doesn't sound so very long ago when you say it out loud, does it? But oh, it was a different age, a different world. Our house back then wasn't as big as this one, and it certainly wasn't as well insulated. You could feel a little whisper of a draft near the windows, a faint chill that made you appreciate the roaring fire in the hearth that much more. The decorations weren't curated from a fancy catalog. They were a motley collection of memories, ornaments my son, David, Leo's grandfather, had made in grade school, clumsy things of popsicle sticks and too much glitter that I still considered masterpieces. We had strings of those big, fat colored bulbs, the kind that got warm to the touch and cast a simple, honest glow across the room. And the tinsel? We didn't have these neat garlands they sell now. We had the real stuff, the silvery, wispy strands that came in a cardboard sleeve. David and I would spend an entire evening patiently, painstakingly, hanging it piece by piece until the tree shimmered like a captured ghost. It was a terrible mess to clean up in January, but my goodness, it was beautiful. The sounds were different too. There was no digital orchestra coming from a wall-sized screen. The soundtrack to our Christmas was a cassette tape of Bing Crosby's Christmas album, played on a clunky boombox that sat on the mantelpiece. The speakers would crackle a little bit, and the tape would hiss, but that voice filled the room with a warmth that the fire could only hope to match. You could hear the muffled silence from outside, the sound of heavy snow falling on the world, blanketing everything in peace. You heard the clink of glasses, the murmur of conversation, real conversation, face to face, because there was nothing else to look at but each other. The dominant sound was laughter, deep, genuine laughter that came from the belly, and the smells. If I close my eyes now, I can still conjure them. The sharp, clean scent of the pine tree we'd cut down ourselves just a week earlier. The spicy perfume of the pomander balls Eleanor and I had made, studding oranges with cloves until our fingertips were sore. And overarching everything, the glorious, mouth-watering aroma wafting from the kitchen. Eleanor's kingdom. The smell of gingerbread baking, of a turkey slowly roasting to golden perfection, the sweet scent of simmering cranberries. That was the smell of anticipation. That was the smell of home. Everything back then felt deliberate. The magic wasn't delivered to our doorstep by a drone or downloaded in an instant. It was built, piece by piece, by our own hands, by our own patience. The anticipation was a huge part of the gift. We would wait all week for the broadcast of a Charlie Brown Christmas on television. There was no streaming it whenever you liked. You had one chance. You gathered together as a family, hot chocolate in hand, and you watched it. It was an event. It was communal. I remember the central mission of that particular Christmas, the great quest of 1993. It was the gift for my son, David. He was 12, and all he wanted, all he had talked about for months, was a Super Nintendo Entertainment System. That gray and purple box was the pinnacle of technology to him, a gateway to other worlds, just as surely as Leo's giant screen is for him now. But you couldn't just go online and click buy now. Oh no. It was a hunt. I remember driving to 3 different department stores. Sears, Kmart, Hills. Each time I'd walk in, my heart thumping with a mix of hope and dread, and ask the person at the electronics counter. Each time, I'd get the same sympathetic shake of the head. Sorry, sold out. I remember the feeling of cold disappointment, driving home in the snow-dusted sedan, the faint sound of Bing Crosby on the car radio, feeling a little less cheerful. I felt like I was failing. But then, a friend from work told me about a smaller, independent toy store across town. A long shot, he said, but worth a try. I went the next day during my lunch break. The little bell above the door jingled as I entered, a sound you just don't hear anymore. And there, behind the counter, sitting on a shelf as if it were the crown jewels, was one last box. The beautiful, iconic packaging with its bold graphics. I think my heart actually skipped a beat. Buying it felt like a victory, a real accomplishment. I had hunted the beast and brought it home. Hiding it in the back of our closet, beneath old winter blankets, felt like guarding a precious secret. The joy wasn't just in the eventual giving of the gift, you see? It was in the getting of it. The effort, the chase. It made the prize all the sweeter. I opened my eyes and looked from the dancing flames back to my great-grandson. He's just defeated one of the Starlight Dragons, and his face is lit with a triumphant smile. It is a joy to see, a pure, unvarnished moment of happiness, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But I do wonder, the box I hunted down in 1993 was so much smaller than the boxes under the tree today. The worlds inside it were made of chunky pixels, not lifelike graphics. But the joy, I wonder if the joy was bigger. We'll talk more about that box and what happened when David finally opened it the next time we meet here by the fire. The fire crackles, and for a moment, it is the loudest thing in the room. A log shifts, settling into its bed of embers, and sends a shower of brilliant sparks up the chimney. They are like tiny, fleeting stars, born and gone in the same instant. I watch them go, and a faint coolness brushes against the side of my face. It's the window. Even these modern double-paned marvels of engineering can't completely hold back the December night. It's a ghost of a chill, nothing more, but it is enough. It is the key that unlocks the door to that other room, the one that exists only in my head. The living room of 1993. That chill takes me back to a sensation that seems almost alien now. The feeling of the cold in that old house. It wasn't an intruder. It was a resident. It lived in the window panes, tracing delicate, fern-like patterns of frost on the glass that David would scratch his name into with a fingernail. It whispered under the door frames and settled in the corners farthest from the fireplace. You didn't fight the cold back then. You made peace with it. You wore thicker socks. You pulled your favorite Afghan, the one Eleanor had crocheted in the stripes of green and gold, up to your chin. That constant, gentle presence of the cold made the warmth feel earned. It made the circle of light and heat from the fire not just a comfort, but a sanctuary. Today, we live in perfectly climate-controlled boxes. We set a thermostat to 72 degrees, and we expect the world to obey. We move from our heated homes to our pre-warmed cars, and we walk into heated stores. We barely even touch the winter air. But back then, winter was something you wore. It was a physical presence you engaged with every time you stepped outside. The air itself felt different. I know that sounds like the ramblings of an old man, to say the very air has changed, but it has. Or perhaps our perception of it has. Stepping out the front door in December of 1993 was like stepping into a glass of ice water. It was a shock to the system, a jolt that made you feel instantly, breathtakingly alive. The air was so cold it felt solid, substantial. Breathing it in was a conscious act. You'd pull it deep into your lungs and feel a clean, sharp sting, a cold fire that woke up every part of you. It had a smell, too, a clean, metallic scent, the smell of frozen earth and distant wood smoke. It smelled of purity, of a world washed clean and put to sleep under a blanket of white. I remember standing on the porch, waiting for the car to warm up on one of those, evenings I was out hunting for David's Super Nintendo. The sky would be a deep, bruised purple, the color of twilight in the dead of winter. There would be no sound. None at all. And this is another thing that is so hard to explain to Leo or his mother. The silence. The silence of 1993 was a different creature from the quiet of today. Our modern quiet is never truly silent. There is always a hum, the low thrum of the refrigerator compressor, the whisper of the furnace fan, the faint, high-pitched whine of a dozen electronic devices on standby, all sleeping with one eye open. We are so used to this electronic symphony that we don't even hear it anymore, but it's there, filling the spaces. But the silence then, especially after a fresh snowfall, was profound. It was a physical thing you could feel in your ears, a gentle pressure. The snow acted as a great, fluffy blanket, absorbing the sounds of the world. The distant rumble of a car on the main road was softened to a faint sigh. The world outside your window seemed to hold its breath. And in that deep, velvety silence, other sounds became treasures. The crunch of your own boots on the crisp snow was a satisfying percussion. The caw of a single crow, flying against the gray sky, was a stark and lonely piece of music. The cheerful jingle of the bell on a shop door was an event. Inside the house, that outdoor silence made our indoor sounds richer. The pop and hiss of the fire. The muffled thud of David dropping a stack of comic books on his bedroom floor. The clatter of Eleanor working in the kitchen, the rhythmic whisking of eggs in a bowl. And Bing Crosby's voice, crooning from the cassette player, wasn't just background noise. In that quiet house, his voice was a guest, a warm and friendly presence sitting right there with us. We didn't have to shout over a television or compete with a tablet. We just were together in the quiet and the snow. Oh, the snow. For my great-grandson Leo, snow is mostly an image on a screen. He sees it in his games, perfect digital flakes falling on mythical castles. When it happens in the real world, it's an alert on his mother's phone. School District 112 is closed. It's a notice about treacherous road conditions. It's a problem to be managed. A line item on the long list of modern inconveniences. But in 1993, snow was pure magic. It was a promise. It didn't begin with a weather app. It began with a feeling. The air would get heavy and still. The sky would turn a strange, luminous gray, as if the light were coming from the ground instead of the clouds. and then you'd see it. The first flake, then another, and another. It was a show. It was the best show in town. I remember David. His face pressed so close to the living room window, his breath would create a perfect circle of fog on the cold glass. He wouldn't say a word. He'd just watch, utterly transfixed, as the world he knew slowly, silently disappeared. The green of the lawn, the black of the asphalt driveway, the sharp edges of the neighbor's fence, all of it softened, simplified, and erased by a gentle, relentless fall of white. "Do you think it'll stick, Dad?" he'd whisper, as if speaking too loudly might scare it away. "I think it just might, son," I'd say, putting a hand on his shoulder, and we would stand there together, father and son, watching the magic happen. The hope was not for an inconvenience to be over, but for the transformation to be complete. We wanted to be snowed in. We wanted the world to shrink, just for a day or two, to the four walls of our own home. The promise of snow wasn't a threat of isolation. It was a gift of togetherness. It was permission to slow down, to stoke the fire, to read a book, to play a board game, to simply be with the people you loved, sealed off from the rest of the world's demands. That physical connection to the season is what I miss. Not the hardship of it, but the reality of it. The feeling of coming in from the biting cold, your cheeks numb and tingling, and slowly unthawing by the fire, feeling the life creep back into your fingers and toes. The weight of an extra blanket on the bed at night. The simple, profound joy of a hot mug of Eleanor's cocoa warming your hands after an hour of shoveling the walk. We've insulated ourselves from all that now. We've conquered the cold, mastered the silence with our own noise, and turned the magic of a snowfall into a logistical problem. We've gained so much comfort, so much convenience, and I am grateful for it truly. My old bones appreciate this draft-free room more than you know. But as I sit here watching the digital snow fall on Leo's screen, I have to wonder, in building our perfect, comfortable, earthy fortresses against the physical world, have we accidentally locked the door on something essential, something wild and real and deeply human? The feeling of the seasons turning not on a calendar, but in your very bones. The stillness that allows you to hear your own heart beating. The shared, simple wonder of watching the world turn white. That, too, was part of the gift. That feeling, that sense of the season living in your bones, was the foundation for everything else. It was the stage upon which the real drama of Christmas was played out. And the name of that drama, my friends, was anticipation. It was a long, slow, beautiful play in 3 acts, and the entire month of December was the performance. Today, we try to compress it. We have one-day shipping, Black Friday sales that start in October, and wish lists that can be fulfilled with the click of a button. We have tried to eliminate the waiting, because we have come to see waiting as an inconvenience, a flaw in the system. But in 1993, waiting wasn't a flaw. It was the engine of the entire experience. It was the space between the notes that made the music. The whole glorious, agonizing affair began in earnest with the arrival of the catalog, the Sears Wish Book. For the children of today, who can conjure up any toy in the world on a screen in seconds, the idea of this book must seem quaint, almost absurd. But for David, for us, it was a sacred text. It wasn't thin and flimsy like the flyers we get in the mail now. It was a proper book, a tome, hundreds of pages thick with a satisfying heft in your hands. It had a particular smell, a blend of glossy paper and fresh ink that, for me, will forever be the scent of impending Christmas. Its arrival was an event. It would be left on the porch by the mailman, and I'd bring it in, cold from the outside air, and place it on the kitchen table like an offering. For the first day, no one was allowed to mark it. We would just look. David would sit there for hours, his chin propped in his hands, turning the pages with a reverence usually reserved for ancient scrolls. His eyes would go wide, absorbing the impossible bounty. Pages of Lego castles and space stations, action figures posed in heroic mid-battle stances. Bicycles so shiny they seemed to glow on the page. And then, after a day of pure, unadulterated dreaming, the ritual of the pen would begin. He'd get a blue ballpoint pen, and with the focus of a surgeon, he would begin to circle things. A gentle, hopeful circle at first. Then, as the days went by and his desires clarified, the circles would become darker, more insistent. Sometimes an item would get 2 or 3 circles. The Super Nintendo, on page 482, looked like it had been attacked by a blue octopus. The ink was so thick you could barely see the picture underneath. That book was a physical manifestation of hope. It was a contract for dreams. He would fall asleep with it on his bed, the pages open to the things he wanted most. He wasn't just looking at toys, he was living with them. He was imagining the feel of the video game controller in his hands, picturing the adventures he would have with those Lego nights. The waiting, the dreaming, the constant revisiting of those circled pages. It wasn't frustrating for him. It was fuel. It was the slow, delicious process of building a desire so strong that its eventual fulfillment would feel like a miracle. We have nothing like that now. Leo's wish list is a digital link his mother sends to the family. It's efficient. It's organized. But it has no weight. It has no smell. You can't dog-ear a web page or feel the thinning of a page that's been turned 100 times by hopeful hands. The dream has been outsourced to a server somewhere. Then there was the daily ritual of the countdown, the Advent calendar. Ours was nothing fancy. It was a simple piece of cardboard, printed with a cheerful, slightly cartoonish nativity scene. Behind 24 little perforated doors was a small piece of waxy, vaguely chocolate-flavored candy. The chocolate was terrible. if I'm being honest. But the candy wasn't the point. The point was the opening of the door. Every single morning in December, before school, David would come downstairs, his hair still sticking up in the back, and go straight to the calendar which hung on the pantry door. He would find the number for the day, and with painstaking care, he'd use his fingernail to pry open the little cardboard door. It was a tiny moment of revelation. A small pop as the perforation gave way. Another day closer. The act was physical, tangible. He was literally tearing open the fabric of time, one day at a time, moving himself closer to the grand prize of Christmas morning. That calendar was a clock that measured time in hope, not in hours. It was a visual representation of the wait. As more and more doors were opened, the sense of imminence grew. The field of closed doors would shrink, and the excitement would build in direct proportion. It turned the abstract concept of 3 weeks until Christmas into a concrete daily mission. And the evenings, they had their own rhythm of anticipation. Television back then was a river, and you had to be there when the good things floated by. There was no recording 100 shows on a magic box, no binging a whole series in one weekend. You had the TV guide, a little magazine that was your map and your schedule, and you planned your week around it. The Christmas specials were the crown jewels of the season. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, A Charlie Brown Christmas. These weren't just shows, they were national holidays. You knew the night they were coming on. You'd talk about it at school, at work. The Grinch is on Tuesday at 8. It was an appointment you made with millions of other families across the country. We'd make popcorn. Eleanor would make hot chocolate with marshmallows. We'd gather in the living room, the only light coming from the television and the colored bulbs on the tree. And we would watch together. The commercials were a part of it too. We didn't see them as an annoyance to be skipped. They were part of the tapestry. The Hershey's Kisses, playing We Wish You a Merry Christmas, the Coca-Cola polar bears. They were little cinematic ornaments hung on the tree of the show itself, and when the final credits rolled, that was it. It was over. You'd sit in the warm afterglow of the story, the feeling of it lingering in the room. You couldn't just hit play next episode. You had to wait. You had to let it settle. The story had to live inside you for a whole year until it came around again. I look at Leo now. He's finished his game and is now watching some cartoon on his tablet. He has access to every Christmas movie ever made, every television special, right at his fingertips. He can watch them in July if he wants. There is no season, there is no scarcity, there is no shared appointment. It's wonderful that he has this access, this freedom, but it's a different kind of magic. It's the magic of abundance, of immediacy. The magic I remember was the magic of scarcity, the magic of the slow reveal. It was a beautiful agony, that month-long wait. It was a lesson in patience, in deferred gratification. It taught you that the wanting of a thing could be just as sweet, in its own way, as the having of it. That the journey, the countdown, the dreaming, was not something to be endured, but something to be savored. It was the tinder that you gathered all month long, so that when the spark of Christmas morning finally arrived, the resulting fire of joy would be big enough to warm you for the rest of the year. We didn't know it then, of course. We just thought we were waiting for presents. But now, all these years later, I see it clearly. The wait itself. The wait was the gift. That wait was a kind of currency, you see. You spent the days of December one by one, and in exchange, you bought a richness of feeling that couldn't be had any other way. And the most tangible sign that your investment was maturing, that the great day was drawing nearer, was the transformation of the house itself, the decorations. For Leo, decorating is something that happens on a Saturday afternoon. His mother pulls down a half-dozen neatly labeled plastic tubs from the attic. They are efficient, organized, and full of things that are, for the most part, newer than he is. In 2 hours, the house is Christmased. It's lovely, of course, perfectly coordinated and tasteful, but it is an installation. An event with a clear start and finish. For us, in 1993, decorating wasn't an event. It was a process. A slow, creeping magic that began just after Thanksgiving and grew a little bit every day. It started with a box. Not a neat plastic tub, but a sagging cardboard box, held together with yellowing tape and marked in my own faded handwriting. Xmas lights. Bringing that box up from the damp chill of the basement was the first official act of the season. The contents of that box were a source of both profound joy and annual frustration. The lights. Oh, the lights. I try to describe them to my daughter, and she just smiles and nods, but I know she doesn't truly understand. Today's lights are miracles of engineering, tiny, brilliant pinpricks of LED light, cool to the touch, strung on impossibly thin wires. You can have 10,000 of them on a single tree, and they draw less power than her coffee maker. But our lights were different. They were substantial. Each bulb was a magnificent pear-shaped jewel of colored glass, the size of my thumb. C9S, they were called. They screwed into thick green sockets on a heavy-duty wire that felt more like an industrial power cord. They didn't just produce light, they produced heat. When you stood near the Christmas tree, you could feel a gentle warmth radiating from it. A soft aura that smelled faintly of warm glass and hot pine needles. You could warm your hands on the Christmas tree. Imagine that. And they were a trial. A yearly test of a father's patience. Inevitably, you would plug in a string and a whole section would be dark. Then the ritual began, the great bulb hunt. You see, if one bulb burned out or was just a little loose in its socket, the whole circuit would fail. So you'd have to check them, one by one. I would sit there on the floor, the mess of tangled green wires spread around me like a fisherman's net, with a known good bulb in my hand. I'd unscrew a dark bulb, screw in the good one. Nothing. Okay, move to the next one, and the next. It was a slow, methodical, maddening process. Eleanor would bring me a cup of coffee. David would sit and watch, offering unhelpful but enthusiastic suggestions. "Did you try that one, Dad? The red one?" "Yes, son. I tried the red one. And then, finally, you'd find it. The one loose or burned-out culprit. You'd tighten it or replace it, and with a sudden, glorious flash, a whole yard of colored light would spring to life. And the feeling? It was pure triumph. It was victory. You hadn't just plugged something in, you had coaxed it into being. You had wrestled with the chaos of the old box and brought forth light and color. That single string of lights glowing warmly on the living room floor felt like a personal achievement. When I see these modern light displays, the ones that cover an entire house in a shimmering, dancing web of light that you can control with an app on your phone, I am genuinely impressed. It's a spectacle, but it's a cold spectacle. The light from an LED is sharp, pure, and digital. It illuminates things, but the light from those old C9 bulbs, it didn't just illuminate, it glowed. It was a soft, warm, analog light, like a tiny, self-contained sunset in red, blue, green, and orange. It soaked into the room. It softened the edges of the furniture. It made everything feel cozy and safe. It was the light of a memory, the light of a hearth. And the tree those lights went on was a character in its own right. We didn't have a perfectly symmetrical, pre-lit tree that folded up into a box. We had an adventure. We'd drive out to a little tree farm, the car smelling of cold vinyl and anticipation. We would walk the rows of pines and firs, the frozen ground crunching under our boots. I'd be looking for something practical, something that would fit in the corner without blocking the doorway. Eleanor would be looking for fullness. David was looking for magic. He would run ahead, darting between the trees, announcing his finds. This one. This is the one. It would invariably be 12 feet tall and shaped like a question mark. We would finally settle on one. Never a perfect one. There was always a bald patch on one side that had to face the wall, or a slightly crooked leader at the top. But it was Asterisk, our asterisk tree. I'd saw it down myself. The clean, sharp scent of fresh pine resin filling the cold air. Getting it home, wrestling it through the door, and getting it to stand up straight in that old cast iron stand was another of the season's great trials. It would shed needles everywhere. It would be sticky with sap. But once it was standing, it transformed the room. It brought the outside in. It filled the entire house with the smell of a winter forest, a scent more real and evocative than any candle or spray could ever hope to be. Then came the ornaments. Our ornament box was not a collection. It was a biography of our family, told in glass, felt, and clay. There was no color scheme, no theme. There was just us. Every ornament we hung had a story. "Oh, look," Eleanor would say, unwrapping a delicate, paper-thin glass bird from its nest of tissue paper. My mother bought this the first year we were married. and she would handle it with such care, as if it held all the light of that first year within its fragile shell. I'd pull out a lopsided clay star, painted a garish yellow, with a single blurry fingerprint forever preserved in its sea surface. David, kindergarten, 1991, I'd announce, and David, who was now 8 and far too cool for such things, would pretend to be embarrassed but would secretly be pleased. He would find the perfect branch for it. There were the silly ones. A goofy-looking Santa Claus riding a motorcycle that I'd bought at a gas station on a business trip. There were the fragile ones, the beautiful silver balls that seemed to hold the reflection of the entire room, warping our faces into funny caricatures. And there were the homemade ones, strings of popcorn and cranberries we'd all made together one evening, our fingers getting sticky and pricked by the needle. Paper snowflakes David had cut out, each one unique and imperfect, that we would tape to the window panes where they would be backlit by the winter twilight. Each year we added 1 or 2 new ones. It was a living history. Hanging those ornaments was like greeting old friends. We would reminisce about where each one came from, who gave it to us, what we were doing that year. The tree wasn't just a decoration, it was our story. It was a little crooked, a little sparse in places, and blazing with a mismatched collection of lights and memories. And it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. I watch my daughter now, scrolling through her phone, looking at pictures of designer Christmas trees. They are stunning, flawless, monochromatic wonders of silver and white, or rustic chic creations of burlap and pine cones. Every ornament is perfectly placed. The lights are evenly distributed. They look like they belong in a magazine. But I wonder, do any of those ornaments have a fingerprint in them? Does she stop and tell Leo a story when she hangs a perfectly spherical, shatterproof ball on a branch? We've gotten so good at making things look perfect, but perfection can be a cold and sterile thing. The beauty of our Christmases past wasn't in their perfection, it was in their humanity. It was in the evidence of our own hands, our own history, hanging there for all to see. It was in the warm, imperfect glow of a light bulb you had to fight to keep lit. It was in the slightly too tall, bald-on-one-side tree that filled the house with the scent of real life. Our decorations weren't just things we put up. They were things we had lived. And that, I think, is a kind of beauty you can't buy in a box. And that scent, the scent of that real, living tree, was the very soul of the season. It was the first thing that greeted you when you came in from the cold, and the last thing you breathed in before you went up to bed. We talk about how things looked, but the way that house asterisk smelled asterisk in December, that was a different kind of magic altogether. It's the part of the memory that has lasted the longest, the part that can still, on a cold day, catch me off guard and pull me right back to that living room in 1993. Today, you can buy that scent in a bottle. you can get a candle labeled Fraser Fir, or a little plug-in device that puffs out a chemical approximation of winter pine. And they're not bad, I suppose. They are pleasant. But they are a photograph of a mountain, not the mountain itself. They are a single, unchanging, sterile note. The scent of our tree was a symphony. It was alive. In the first few days, it was sharp and potent, a vibrant, resinous smell so powerful it was almost spicy. You'd brush against a branch, and the sap would stick to your sweater, and you'd carry that fragrance with you all day, a little reminder of the magic waiting at home. The sap would get on your hands, a sticky, golden residue that soap and water couldn't quite conquer. You'd have to use a little butter or oil to dissolve it, and even then, a ghost of the pine would remain. It wasn't an inconvenience, it was proof. Proof that you had wrestled a piece of the wild winter forest into your home. As the weeks went on, the scent would change. It would mellow. The sharp, sappy edge would soften, blending with the scent of the house itself. It mixed with the faint, dusty warmth coming from the heating vents, the smell of old wood and the wool of the living room rug. By Christmas week, it was a softer, gentler fragrance, more like the memory of a forest than the forest itself. And there was that other smell, the one that came from the lights, those old, hot C9 bulbs, a faint, almost imperceptible scent of warm glass and dust, and when a needle would rest against a bulb for too long, a tiny wisp of toasted pine. It was the smell of life, of gradual change, of time passing. A candle smells the same on its last day as it does on its first. Our tree smelled of a journey, but the domain of the pine, powerful as it was, ended at the kitchen doorway. The kitchen. That was Eleanor's kingdom. And in December, it became a factory of the most wonderful aromas imaginable. If the living room smelled of the forest, the kitchen smelled of the hearth, of warmth and sugar and love made edible. Her baking wasn't a one-day affair, a marathon of cookie making to be packed in tins and finished. It was a constant, low-level hum of activity that permeated the entire month. One week, it would be the gingerbread, not just cookies, but a proper, dark, heavy gingerbread cake, dense with molasses and pungent with ginger, cinnamon, and cloves. The smell of it baking was like a thick, warm blanket. It was a scent with weight, a scent you could almost lean against. It would cling to the curtains in the kitchen for days. But the main event, the true scent of Christmas Eve approaching, was the sugar cookies. It began with the sound. The clank of the big ceramic mixing bowl coming down from the high shelf. The whir of the electric mixer, a sound that would bring David running from wherever he was in the house. The ingredients themselves had their own quiet scents, the powdery sweetness of confectioner's sugar, the rich, almost floral note of vanilla extract, the creamy, comforting smell of butter and flour. Eleanor didn't work from a pristine stainless steel countertop like the ones you see on cooking shows. She worked from our old Formica table, and the process was a glorious mess. A fine dusting of flour would settle on everything, on her apron, on the tip of her nose, on the floor where it would crunch softly underfoot. She would let David help, which mostly consisted of him stealing little knobs of raw dough when he thought she wasn't looking. Of course, she always was. She'd just smile to herself. The taste of that dough, sweet, gritty, buttery, was a forbidden delicacy, a pre-Christmas ritual all its own. Then came the rolling. The dull thud of the wooden rolling pin against the floured board. She would roll the dough out into a pale, smooth sheet, and David would be given the box of cookie cutters. They were old, tin-plated things, some of them slightly bent out of shape from years of use. There was a Santa, a snowman, a star, a bell, and a Christmas tree with a ridiculously crooked trunk. He would press them into the dough with intense concentration, wiggling them just so to make sure the cut was clean. And then the smell would begin. The first tray would go into the oven, and for 10 minutes, there would only be anticipation. You'd stand in the kitchen, and you could feel the warmth from the oven door on your face. And then it would start. A faint, buttery aroma at first, which would slowly swell and bloom into the most perfect, golden, soul-satisfying smell of baking sugar cookies. It would roll out of the kitchen in a warm, invisible wave, conquering the scent of the pine tree, marching down the hallway and curling its tendrils up the stairs. It was the smell of pure, unadulterated comfort. It was the scent of a mother's care, and sometimes, inevitably, a batch would be forgotten for a minute too long. The phone would ring, or David would cause some minor distraction, and the beautiful golden smell would be tinged with something darker, a sharper, more acrid note. "Oh, shoot," Eleanor would say, grabbing an oven mitt. She'd pull out the tray, and the edges of the little Santas and snowmen would be a dark, caramelized brown, almost black. The smell of a slightly burnt cookie is a tragedy in miniature. It's the smell of almost perfect. But we never threw them out. I would always eat the burnt ones. I'd dunk them in milk to soften the crispy edges, and they were still delicious. In a way, those slightly burnt cookies were the most important part of the memory, because they were real. Nothing is perfect. Life isn't perfect. Love isn't about perfection. It's about showing up, making the effort, and sometimes burning the edges a little. We've become so afraid of imperfection now. We want the flawless bakery-bought cookies that all look identical. But the memory isn't in the cookie. It's in the making. It's in the flour on your mother's nose and the slightly too dark edges of a forgotten batch. I watch Leo's mother now. She's a wonderful baker. She finds a recipe online, and the ingredients are delivered to her door. Her cookies are beautiful, perfectly decorated with royal icing. The kitchen is cleaned up in minutes. It's efficient, and the house smells lovely for a few hours. But the smells of 1993 weren't just a byproduct of an activity. They were the activity. They were the atmosphere we lived and breathed. It was the pine and the cookies and the gingerbread. It was the smoky draft from the fireplace when the wind blew just right. It was the smell of damp wool and leather from our winter coats drying near the heat. It was the faint, clean scent of snow in the air when you opened the front door. It was even the smell of old paper and ink from the Christmas cards that filled a basket on the hall table. All those smells layered on top of one another, creating something unique, something that only existed in that house, in that month, in that year. You can't bottle that. You can't plug it into a wall. It has to be lived. It has to be made. It has to be earned. The scent of a real tree comes with the price of sweeping up needles every day. The scent of real cookies comes with the price of a messy kitchen and sometimes a few burnt edges. And that is what I try to tell my grandson in my own way. That the best things in life, the memories that will sustain you, are not the ones that are most convenient or most perfect. They are the ones that are most real. And nothing is more real than a memory that you can still, 30 years later, almost smell. It's an echo that never truly fades. And some echoes, you know, they aren't smells at all. Some are sounds. The quiet crunch of snow under a car tire in the driveway. The metallic click of the mail slot opening, followed by the soft whisper of letters sliding onto the doormat. But once a year, usually in late October or early November, that whisper was replaced by a solid, authoritative asterisk thud asterisk. It was a sound with weight and substance. It was a sound that announced without any doubt that the season of wishing had officially begun. That thud was the sound of the Christmas catalog arriving. Today, Leo's wishes arrive in a constant, silent stream. They flicker across his tablet screen, targeted ads tailored to his viewing habits, suggestions from algorithms that know what he wants before he does. His wish list is a cloud-based document, a living, editable thing he can add to with a click, anytime, anywhere. It is efficient and boundless, but it has no weight. It makes no sound when it arrives. The catalog was an object. It was a tome. In our house, it was the Sears Wish Book, but for others, it might have been J.C. Penney or Montgomery Ward. It didn't matter the name on the cover. They were all gateways to the same kingdom. It was nearly 1,000 pages thick, a heavy, glossy brick of a book that felt important in your hands. The cover would feature a perfect, rosy-cheeked family in matching sweaters gathered around a fireplace, the very picture of manufactured holiday bliss. But we weren't interested in the cover. We were interested in the universe it contained, bringing it in from the cold doormat. You could feel the chill still clinging to its pages. It smelled of new ink and fresh, coated paper, a clean chemical scent that, for us, was as much a part of Christmas as pine and gingerbread. It was a smell of pure, unadulterated potential, and possessing it was the first order of business. As soon as that thud echoed through the house, it was a race. David, my son, would drop whatever he was doing and scramble for the front hall. To be the first to touch it, to claim it, was a significant victory. He would carry it not like a magazine, but like a sacred text. He'd bring it into the living room where the tree stood with its warm, glowing C9 lights, and he would lay it on the floor with a sense of ceremony. The ritual was never rushed. You didn't just tear it open to the toy section. That would be like eating dessert before dinner. It would spoil the magic. The journey was part of the destination. He would lie on his stomach on the rug, his chin propped in his hands, and he would begin at the beginning. Page 1. Women's coats. He'd turn the page. Men's sweaters. Page after page of sensible adult things. Power tools, bed linens, kitchen appliances. He wasn't interested in any of it, of course, but he seemed to understand instinctively that this slow pilgrimage through the mundane world of grown-up needs was what gave the eventual arrival in the toy section its power. It was the long, straight desert road that made the first glimpse of the shining city so breathtaking. Eleanor and I would watch him. He would be completely absorbed, lost in that paper world. The only sound would be the soft, slick rustle of the page turning, a sound full of anticipation. And then he would reach it. You would know the moment he arrived. A stillness would come over him. His breathing would slow. He had entered the promised land, the toy section. In 1993, those pages were a work of art. They weren't just sterile product shots on a white background like you see online. They were vibrant, chaotic, and glorious dioramas of pure joy. Each two-page spread was a carefully constructed scene, a snapshot of a fantasy. There would be a massive Lego castle, fully built with little plastic knights mid-battle, a dragon swooping from an imaginary sky. It wasn't just a box of bricks. It was an epic adventure you could hold. There would be the Barbie section, with the dream house assembled and populated, Barbie and her friends frozen in the middle of a glamorous party, their plastic smiles promising a world of endless possibility. And the video games. The pages for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis were like portals to another dimension. They showed screenshots of the games, fuzzy, pixelated images that nonetheless seemed impossibly futuristic. Mario soaring on his cape, Sonic curled into a blue blur. The consoles themselves were displayed like high-tech artifacts, sleek gray and black machines that promised to unlock those worlds. To David, that wasn't a piece of electronics. It was a magic box. He would spend hours, maybe even days, on this initial survey. He was like a scholar studying a rare manuscript. He would analyze every detail, the expressions on the faces of the children pictured playing with the toys, the accessories that came with each action figure, the sheer, overwhelming number of tiny cars in a Micro Machines playset. It was a process of deep and serious consideration. After the survey came the most important part of the ritual, the circling. This required a specific instrument, not just any pen. It had to be a good one, a ballpoint with a fresh, full line. He would come to me or Eleanor. "Can I borrow a pen? A good one?" Armed with his chosen pen, he would return to the catalog, his face a mask of concentration. This was where fantasy began to transform into a concrete request. The act of drawing a circle around an item was a declaration. It was planting a flag. It was saying, "This one, out of all the wonders in this 1,000-page universe, this is the one that I choose. This is the shape of my wish." Sometimes a single, neat circle would suffice. But for the items of deepest desire, the massive Lego pirate ship, the Super Nintendo with the Super Scope 6, the markings became more elaborate. A second circle would be drawn for emphasis. The name of the item might be underlined. An exclamation point or 3 might be added in the margin. The page would become a map of his heart, marked with the locations of its treasure, and it was a finite resource. That was the other lesson the catalog taught. The book had a last page. You couldn't just want everything, not in the same way you can click Add to Wish List 100 times online. The physical act of circling forced a choice, an edit. You couldn't circle every single thing on a page, or the message would be lost. You had to decide. What did you really want? It was an early lesson in economics, in the concept of scarcity. Even wishes had a budget. Once the circling was complete, the book would take on a new role. It became an object of lobbying and negotiation. He would casually leave it open on the coffee table, turned to a page with a particularly emphatic circle on it. He would bring it to us to plead his case. "See, Dad, the G.I. Joe headquarters has a real working elevator and a jail. We could put the bad guys in the jail." He wasn't just describing a toy. He was selling us the story he had already built in his mind. He was inviting us into the world he wanted to create. We would listen and nod and offer non-committal but encouraging sounds. Oh, that's really something. Look at all the pieces that come with that. I look at Leo on his tablet, and the process is so different. He flits from one thing to the next. A video of someone unboxing a toy, then a clip from a video game, then an ad for a movie. He wants something intensely for 5 minutes, until the next shiny thing scrolls into view. The desires are many, but they seem shallow, transient. They don't have the time to take root and grow in his imagination the way they did for David. David's desire for that Lego ship was a season-long project. He didn't just want it on Christmas morning, he wanted it in November when he circled it. He wanted it in early December when he re-examined the page, making sure the ink was still dark. The wanting was a huge part of the gift. We've traded a thick, finite book of dreams for an infinite, weightless scroll of desires. And I can't help but feel that something has been lost. The catalog wasn't just a tool for shopping, it was a textbook for imagination. It was a training ground for patience. The sheer, frustrating, wonderful slowness of it all was the point. You had to wait for it to arrive. You had to turn every single page to get to the good part. You had to spend weeks, even months, looking at the picture of the thing you wanted, imagining it, building stories around it, before you ever had a chance of holding it in your hands. That waiting, that period of focused dreaming, is a kind of currency. You spend the days, and in return, you buy a richness of feeling that instant gratification can never offer. The joy of finally unwrapping that gift on Christmas morning was magnified 100-fold by the memory of the page, the feel of the pen in your hand as you drew that circle, making your wish for the first time, visible and real. It was the culmination of a long and sacred process, a process that began with a simple, hopeful thud asterisk on the front hall floor. The catalog was the dictionary of desire, the encyclopedia of earthly wants. Those circles drawn in ballpoint pen were notes, drafts, the minutes of a very serious meeting held between a boy and his own hopeful heart. But they were not the final petition. For that, an entirely different, far more solemn ritual was required. The scribbles in the wish book were a message to us, his parents, a form of earthly lobbying. But the true appeal, the one sent to the highest court of Christmas, had to be handwritten. It had to be a letter to Santa Claus. This wasn't an email. It wasn't a text message fired off into the digital ether. Today, you can go online and find websites that will generate a letter for you, fill in the blanks, click to send. It takes all of 30 seconds. It is a transaction. But in 1993, for my son David, it was a pilgrimage. The process began at the kitchen table, usually on a cold, gray afternoon in the first week of December. Eleanor would clear the space, wiping it down until the formica shone, and she would produce the materials, which were always the same. Not a fancy kit from a store with pre-printed borders of holly. She felt that was cheating somehow. Instead, she would pull out a single, perfect sheet of wide-ruled loose-leaf paper, the kind with the pale blue lines and the soft red line running down the left margin. It was school paper. It was serious paper. It connoted work and effort and importance, and with it, a pencil, not a pen. A letter to Santa was too important for ink. Ink was final. What if you made a mistake? What if you misspelled Nintendo? Or, heaven forbid, changed your mind about the color of the bicycle at the last minute? No, it had to be a pencil, a classic yellow number 2 pencil, which she would sharpen for him herself, using the old crank-operated sharpener screwed to the wall in the laundry room. The grinding sound of the sharpener was the starting gun. She would hand him the pencil, its fresh, pale wood point sharp enough to be a weapon, the graphite tip a perfect gleaming cone, and beside it, a clean pink eraser, a block of pure possibility, of second chances. David would sit at the table, the vast, empty, white page before him. The catalog, dog-eared and heavy, would be open beside him for reference, and he would just stare at the page for a long time. This was perhaps the most important piece of writing he would do all year. It carried more weight than any book report or spelling test. The silence in the kitchen would be thick with concentration. "How do you start?" he'd ask, even though he knew the answer. And Eleanor, drying a dish nearby, would reply without turning around, "You start with respect, dear Santa Claus." He would grip the pencil, his knuckles white. The first letter, the capital D, would be a monumental undertaking. He would draw it rather than write it, pressing down so hard you could see the indentation on the other side of the paper. Then the painstaking formation of each subsequent letter. His tongue would be sticking out of the corner of his mouth, a little flag of focus. The body of the letter was always a delicate negotiation between politeness and purpose. It usually began with a few pleasantries, as he had been taught. "I hope you are well. I hope the reindeer are ready for the big trip." Sometimes he would add a detail he'd picked up from a story or a television special. "I hope Mrs. Claus has made you lots of cookies." He understood, even at that age, that you don't just launch into your list of demands. You must establish a relationship. Then, the heart of the matter. This was where the catalog came in. He would look from the circled items in the glossy book to his own humble, ruled page, and a final brutal round of edits would take place. The catalog was a boundless dreamscape where he could circle dozens of things. But the letter felt more real, more binding. He seemed to know instinctively that even Santa Claus had his limits. Asking for too much felt greedy, and greed, he knew, was a good way to end up on the naughty list. So he would choose. He would usually list 3, maybe 4 of the most important items. The Super Nintendo was a given. That was non-negotiable. The Lego pirate ship, perhaps one of the larger G.I. Joe vehicles. He would write them out, his pencil scratching softly against the paper. The spelling would be phonetic and charmingly wrong. Super Nintendo. Lego pirate ship. He would pause, look up at his mother. "Mom, how do you spell headquarters?" And she would spell it for him, slowly, and he would copy it down. Each letter a separate, considered creation. He never asked her to fix the other words. I think, in his mind, those were close enough. Santa would understand. He was magic, after all. The closing was as important as the opening. It was always simple. "I have been a very good boy this year." A statement of fact, offered without arrogance. And then, "Thank you, your friend David." Not love David. That was for family. To Santa, he was a friend, a partner in this annual enterprise. He would then hand the pencil and the letter to Eleanor for inspection. She would read it over, her expression serious and thoughtful, as if reviewing a legal document. She would never point out a spelling error. She would only nod. "It's perfect," she would say. "I think he'll know exactly what you mean." And that validation was everything. It was the official seal of approval. The next steps could begin. He would fold the letter. Once, then twice. The creases had to be sharp, exact. He would slide the folded paper into a plain white envelope, and then came the part that was both a chore and a delicacy: sealing it. He would hold the envelope up, and with the utmost seriousness, lick the strip of glue on the flap. The faint, vaguely sweet, papery taste of envelope glue. Another one of those sensory details that is gone from the world now. He would press it down firmly, running his thumb along the seam to make sure it was secure. A secret, now sealed. The address was simple: Santa Claus, the North Pole. No street address, no zip code needed. The Postal Service, we assured him, had a special arrangement. And then the stamp. A Christmas stamp, of course. A tiny, sticky picture of a wreath or a snowman. He would press it firmly onto the top right corner. The letter was now a complete, official piece of mail. It had become a real object, a vessel carrying all the hope a little boy's heart could hold. But its journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The final act was the walk to the mailbox. This was my job. "Ready to go mail it, champ?" I'd ask. His eyes would light up. He would scramble to put on his coat, his boots, his hat and mittens. I'd do the same. We would step out of the warm pine and cookie-scented house into the sharp, cold air of a December evening. Sometimes a few lazy snowflakes would be drifting down, catching in the glow of the porch light. Our mailbox wasn't on the house. It was at the end of our long driveway. And that walk, holding my hand with one mitten and clutching the precious envelope in the other, was a silent, solemn procession. The only sound was the crunch of our boots on the frozen ground or in the thin layer of snow. He held the letter like it was a fragile bird. When we reached the mailbox, I would lift him up. The cold, painted metal of the box was another part of the ritual. He would pull down the creaky little door with his mitten-clad hand. He'd pause for a moment, looking at the white rectangle in his hand, and then at the dark, empty space inside the mailbox. This was the moment of letting go, the moment of faith. He would push the letter inside. It would land with a soft, whispery thud. And he would push the little red flag up. The signal. A bright slash of color against the gray evening. The message had been sent. We would walk back to the house in silence. He had done his part. The rest was up to forces beyond his control. The rest was magic. I think about Leo. Last year, his mother asked him what he wanted for Christmas. He just pointed his finger at her phone and said, "That one." Later, I saw her on her laptop, adding it to a digital shopping cart. There was no letter. There was no pencil, no eraser, no walk to the mailbox. There was no ceremony. The wish was spoken, and it was fulfilled with a click. It was so easy, so frictionless, and I know what we've gained. We've gained convenience, efficiency. No need to worry about spelling or finding a stamp. But what have we lost? We've lost the weight of the wish. David's wish had a physical form. It was an object he created with his own hands. It took time. It took effort. The act of writing it down, of wrestling with the words and the letters, forced him to truly consider what he wanted. It transformed a fleeting desire into a considered, tangible request. He had to put a piece of himself into that letter. His time, his concentration, his best printing. The walk to the mailbox wasn't just a walk. It was an act of faith. He was entrusting his deepest wish to the cold, dark world, believing that it would find its way to the right place. That journey, that physical act of sending something of yourself out into the unknown and hoping for the best, is a powerful lesson. It teaches you that wishing isn't passive, it's an act. It requires you to do something. We saved those letters. Eleanor kept every single one. I found them in a box after she was gone. Dear Santa, written in a child's wobbly pencil. The misspelled words, the earnest requests, they aren't just lists of toys. They are artifacts of belief. They are the fossil record of his childhood hope, preserved on fragile, yellowing paper. You can't save a click. You can't hold a transaction in your hands 30 years later and feel the ghost of the little boy who made it. That letter and the ritual around it was a way of making magic real. It took an idea, a wish, and gave it substance. It gave it a journey. And in doing so, it made the eventual gift mean so much more. It wasn't just a toy from a store. It was the answer to a prayer that he himself had written, and folded, and sealed, and sent on its way in the cold December darkness. It was proof that he had been heard. After the letter was sent, a different kind of quiet settled over the house. The intense, focused energy of wishing was done. The lobbying and circling in the catalog subsided. The case had been made, the appeal filed with the highest authority. Now, all that was left was the waiting. And that waiting period, those few weeks between the mailing of the letter and the arrival of Christmas Eve, had its own unique texture. It was a time of simmering, a low, constant heat of anticipation under everything. Every day felt like a step up a long staircase, and we all knew, without needing to say it, where the staircase led. And then, finally, you would wake up one morning and know you were on the last step. It was December the 24th, Christmas Eve. The air in the house on Christmas Eve was different. I swear you could feel it on your skin. It was thicker, charged with a kind of static electricity of pure joy and impatience. It wasn't a calm day. Calm was for Christmas Day itself, the quiet aftermath of the storm. Christmas Eve was the storm. It was a day of beautiful, controlled chaos, a crescendo building towards the silence of midnight. The day's soundtrack began in the kitchen. Long before the radio was even switched on, the percussion was provided by Eleanor. The rhythmic thump of a wooden spoon against the side of a mixing bowl, the metallic scrape of a spatula on a cookie sheet, the crisp, tearing sound of wax paper being pulled from its box. These were the opening notes of the symphony. By 1993, our traditions were set in stone. Christmas Eve Day was for baking, not the complicated fruitcakes or puddings. Those had been made weeks earlier and were now aging peacefully in the pantry. This was for the immediate, the urgent, the sugar cookies that David would decorate, the gingerbread men, the peanut butter blossoms that had to have the chocolate kiss pressed into their center the moment they came out of the oven, still soft and hot. The whole house smelled of it. A warm, sweet fog of cinnamon, ginger, and melting butter that seeped into the curtains and the carpets. It was a smell that said, "Today is not a normal day." And while Eleanor commanded the kitchen, my domain was elsewhere. I was the quartermaster of last-minute logistics. My chief duty was wrapping. We had a system. The big, important gifts from Santa were, of course, never wrapped. They would appear, as if by magic, assembled and ready under the tree on Christmas morning. But the gifts from us, from aunts and uncles, from grandparents, those needed wrapping. And inevitably, there were a few I'd left to the last minute. I would set up my station on the living room floor, often trying to do it while David was occupied, which was a fool's errand. The rustle of the paper, the satisfying asterisk, snick asterisk of the scissors gliding through a long sheet, the infuriating search for the end of the Scotch tape roll. These sounds were a siren's call to him. "What's that, Dad? Is that for me? Can I see? This is for your Aunt Carol," I'd say, trying to shield the box with my body. You wouldn't be interested. It was a delicate dance of concealment and diversion. The papers themselves were glorious, not the elegant single pattern rolls you see today. We had the multi-packs of folded paper, creased into squares, with cartoon Santas, reindeer with goofy grins, snowmen in top hats. The challenge was always trying to wrap something in a paper that was just a little too small, piecing it together with tape and a strategically placed bow. It was an art form born of necessity, and through all this activity, weaving through the smells of baking and the sounds of wrapping, was the constant unifying presence of the radio. In our house, it was the big console stereo in the living room, a piece of furniture in its own right. On Christmas Eve morning, it would be turned on and tuned to the local AM station that played nothing but Christmas music all day long. Not a playlist, not an algorithm, a real, live human being, a DJ with a warm, slightly corny voice, would be our guide for the day. That was Burl Ives with a holiday classic, he'd announce. And coming up after the break, we've got some Bing Crosby for you. But first, a word from Henderson's Hardware, having a fantastic sale on snow shovels. Don't get caught unprepared. You couldn't skip the ads. You couldn't thumb down the songs you didn't like. You were on a journey with everyone else in town who was tuned to that same station. You were hearing Feliz Navidad at the exact same moment as the lady at the grocery store, the fellow filling his car with gas, the family in the house across the street. It was a shared current, a river of sound that flowed through the whole community. When Nat King Cole's voice came on, rich and smooth as velvet, singing about chestnuts roasting on an open fire, everything would seem to pause for a moment. Eleanor would stop stirring. I'd stop fumbling with the tape. We would just listen. Some songs demanded that respect. They were pillars of the season. David, meanwhile, was a vessel of pure, unadulterated energy. He couldn't contain it. He vibrated with it. He would run from the kitchen, where he'd helped Eleanor by getting flour on his nose, to the living room, where he'd help me by trying to stick bows on the dog. He was a whirlwind of questions. Is Santa on his way yet? He's still getting the sleigh ready, buddy. It's a long trip. How will he know I've been good? He knows. That's his whole job. Will he eat the cookies we leave? Every last crumb. Especially if they're the ones you decorated. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long blue shadows on the snow outside, the energy in the house would shift. The frantic preparations would wind down. The cookies were cooling on racks. The last of the presents were wrapped and hidden away. The next phase was beginning. This was the magical time. The gloaming of Christmas Eve. This was when we would turn off the overhead lights and plug in the Christmas tree. That moment was always a quiet miracle. The sudden bloom of soft-colored light from those big, old-fashioned C9 bulbs. They threw off a warmth you could feel, painting the walls with gentle splotches of red, green, blue, and yellow. The whole room would be transformed, softened, made holy by that light. We would eat a simple dinner, another tradition. Something easy that Eleanor could prepare without much fuss. Usually a big pot of soup and some sandwiches. We'd eat it on trays in the living room, in the glow of the tree. The radio would still be playing, but the DJ's voice seemed softer now, more reverent. He was playing the carols now. Silent Night. Oh, holy night. The sacred songs for the sacred part of the evening. And then, the final, most crucial ritual of the day. Preparing for the visitor. David would take this job with a seriousness that was almost comical in its intensity. He would select the very best of the cookies he had decorated, the ones with the most sprinkles, the ones that weren't slightly burned. He would arrange them on a special plate, the one with the poinsettias painted on it, that we only used once a year. He would pour a glass of milk, being careful not to spill a drop. And then the carrots for the reindeer, a gesture of consideration for the animals, which Eleanor had always insisted upon. He would carry the offering to the fireplace and set it down carefully on the hearth. There, he'd say, dusting his hands like a job well done. Now he'll have a good snack. Getting him to bed was the final challenge. It was like trying to bottle lightning. He was too excited, too wired. His mind was racing with visions of sleigh bells and reindeer. He'd be in his pajamas, tucked into bed, but his eyes would be wide open, staring at the ceiling. "I can't sleep, Dad. You have to try. He won't come until you're asleep. It's the most important rule." This was the great paradox of Christmas Eve for a child. The one night you most wanted to stay awake was the one night you absolutely had to be asleep. I would read him "'Twas the Night Before Christmas" from the same worn copy we read every year. His eyelids would get heavy, but he would fight it. Eventually, though, the long, exciting day would win. His breathing would deepen and slow, and he would finally be gone, sailing in the deep, quiet seas of sleep. Eleanor and I would stand in his doorway for a moment, watching him. The house, for the first time all day, was utterly silent. The radio was off. The kitchen was clean. The only sound was the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of the furnace. And now our Christmas Eve began. This was the secret time, the adult time. We were the magicians, the stage hands, the ones who made the whole production work. I would go to the attic, to the back of our closet, to the trunk of the car in the cold garage. All the places where the magic had been hidden. And we would bring it all into the living room. The Super Nintendo box, big and full of promise. The Lego pirate ship, its picture of high seas adventure, impossibly exciting. Even to me, the new bicycle. We would arrange them under the tree, carefully, quietly, like we were decorating an altar. We'd fill his stocking. We'd take a single, theatrical bite out of a cookie and drink half the milk. We'd nibble the ends of the carrots. We had to complete the story. We had to provide the evidence. When we were finished, we would stand back and look at our work. The room was a landscape of a little boy's answered prayers, all bathed in the warm, colored light of the tree. We were exhausted. We had been running all day, but it was a good tired, a deep, fulfilling ache that came from spending ourselves completely in the service of a child's joy. We would sit on the couch together, just for a minute, not saying a word, looking at the scene we had created. In that quiet moment, with the house finally still and the whole world seeming to hold its breath, that was it. That was the heart of it all. That crackling energy had finally resolved into a perfect, peaceful silence. It was Christmas, and in that quiet, in that stillness, you would finally go to bed. Not to sleep, not really, for a parent on Christmas Eve. Sleep is a shallow, fitful thing. You're lying in the dark, but you're listening. Listening for the creak of a floorboard, for the rustle of a blanket from the other room, for the first sign that the magic is about to be discovered. In 1993, there was no alarm clock on Christmas morning. There was only David's internal clock, a mechanism wound tight with a year's worth of anticipation and set to go off at the first hint of dawn. The first sound wasn't a sound at all. It was a change in the house's pressure, a sense of a small body, now awake and vibrating with an energy that could power the entire town. Then the faintest sound would travel through the walls. The soft asterisk thump asterisk of his feet hitting the floor. The next sound was the creak. Every house has one. Ours was the third step from the top of the stairs. It groaned with a low, mournful sound, and it was the official starting pistol of Christmas Day. Eleanor and I would hear it, and our eyes would meet in the dim light of our bedroom. No words needed to be spoken. The day had begun. A moment later, a little head would peek around our door frame. A whisper, loud with the effort of trying to be quiet. "Is it morning yet? Can we go down?" There were rules, of course. You couldn't just stampede down the stairs. The parents had to go first. To, make sure Santa had come and gone safely. It was a flimsy pretext, but it was part of the ceremony. The true purpose was to allow us a moment to be there first, to see his face when he saw it all. "Okay, buddy," I'd say, my voice thick with sleep. "Let's go see." The walk down those stairs was its own special kind of music. The soft padding of his slippered feet behind me, the whisper of his pajama pants, the sound of his breathing, quick and shallow with excitement. And then we would reach the bottom step and turn into the living room, and for a few seconds, there would be a profound and perfect silence. The only sound was the soft, almost imperceptible hum of the colored lights on the tree. It was a holy silence, a silence of pure astonishment. His eyes would be wide, taking in the impossible scene. The half-eaten cookie, the empty milk glass, the bicycle that wasn't there when he went to bed. The mountain of presents that had materialized out of thin air. In that moment, he believed in magic with every fiber of his being. And seeing that look on his face, Eleanor and I believed in it too. But that silence was a fragile thing, and it was never meant to last. The first sound to break it was always the stocking. He would approach it with a kind of reverence, lifting it carefully from the hook on the mantelpiece. The sound it made was a gentle, muffled crinkle, the sound of felt and yarn filled with small, mysterious objects. He would sit cross-legged on the floor, and the contents would come out, one by one, each with its own signature sound. The dull asterisk thud asterisk of a Satsuma orange hitting the carpet, the plastic rattle of a new box of crayons, the high-pitched, satisfying asterisk boing asterisk of a bouncy ball dropped from a short height, the crinkle of a chocolate bar's wrapper. These were the gentle opening notes, the quiet prelude to the symphony that was about to erupt. Once the stocking was empty, his eyes would turn to the main event, the pile under the tree. He would look to me, a silent question in his eyes. I would nod, permission granted, and that's when the real concert began. The primary instrument of a Christmas morning in 1993 was paper, wrapping paper, and it played 1,000 different notes. There was the high-pitched anticipatory asterisk, sip, asterisk of a fingernail finding a seam and slowly, carefully pulling it back. There was the sharp, percussive asterisk, snick asterisk of a ribbon being pulled tight until it curled into a perfect spiral. And then there was the main theme, the glorious, chaotic, unrestrained sound of tearing. A small tentative rip would start it. Asterisk, asterisk, followed by a pause. And then, as confidence grew, a great, joyful cascade of it. Asterisk, Ricky beep, asterisk. A sound of pure, unbridled discovery. He would tear into the paper with a ferocity born of pure excitement, and the room would fill with the noise. It wasn't a background noise. It was asterisk the event. It was the sound of joy made tangible. And over this symphony of tearing paper, our voices were the accompaniment. "Oh, look at that one," Eleanor would say, her voice warm and happy. "Who's that from?" I'd ask, pointing to a tag, and David would stop mid-tear to read it. "It's from Grandma and Grandpa," he'd shout, his voice cracking with glee. His own contributions were mostly gasps and single words. "Wow! Whoa! The Legos, the pirate ship. I got it." The gifts themselves had their own sounds once they were freed from their paper prisons. The heavy, satisfying rattle of 1,000 plastic bricks shifting inside a large cardboard box. The cascade of those bricks being poured onto the rug, a sound like a tiny plastic waterfall. The clicks and snaps as the first few pieces were joined together. There was no electronic boot-up chime. The sound of the Lego set was the sound of imagination beginning to work. The sound of a child's hands bringing something new into the world. The G.I. Joe headquarters made its own music. The squeak of plastic parts being twisted into place. The click-clack of the tiny articulated limbs of the action figures, the simple mechanical asterisk of the hand-cranked elevator. These were physical sounds, sounds that required effort. The toy didn't perform for you, you performed with the toy. Its sounds were a direct result of your own actions, and the paper kept piling up. The rustle and crush of it became the foundation of the room's soundscape. He would toss a sheet of used paper over his shoulder, and it would land with a soft asterisk, whump asterisk on the growing pile. After a while, he was sitting in a nest of it, a colorful, crinkled kingdom of discarded mystery. I think back to that soundscape. It was so completely analog, so human. The loudest noise in the room was the sound of a little boy's happiness, expressed through torn paper and a shouting voice. The second loudest was the sound of his parents' laughter. We weren't observing his joy from a distance. We were in the middle of it, enveloped by the same sounds, breathing the same paper-scented air. I was thinking about this last year, on Christmas morning with my grandson, Leo. The scene, at first glance, was similar. A tree, presents, an excited child. But the sound was entirely different. Leo tore through his gifts with the same excitement as David once had. The paper made the same ripping noise for a time, but it was a hurried sound. It was an obstacle. The goal was not the unwrapping, it was the activation. He opened his big gift, a new tablet, and the first significant sound it made was a pleasant, pre-programmed little chime as it powered on. And then a new kind of silence fell. He found the headphones that came with it, and he put them on. And just like that, he was gone. He was physically in the room with us, but his auditory world was now his own. He was in a digital space, listening to the sounds of a game, the pings and explosions and music that we couldn't hear. The communal symphony of Christmas morning had ended abruptly, replaced by a solo performance for an audience of one. My daughter and her husband were on their own phones, taking pictures of him, texting relatives. The room was quiet. There was no more paper to tear, no more exclamations of discovery. The sounds of the house were the occasional notification, asterisk, ping, asterisk, from a phone, the faint, tinny sounds from Leo's headphones that bled into the room, and our own, quieter voices, speaking at a lower volume now, as if not to disturb him. The chaos was gone. The glorious, messy, loud, shared experience of sound had been replaced by a quiet, orderly, and strangely separate peace. And that's what I think we've lost. We've lost the noise. We mistake that old noise for a lack of sophistication, for something to be tidied up and streamlined. But that noise was the thing itself. The crinkle and rip of paper wasn't just a covering for the gift. It was the sound of anticipation itself. The cacophony of everyone talking and laughing at once wasn't rude. It was the sound of a family sharing a single, powerful emotion in the same space and time. It was a joyful noise. David's new Super Nintendo, when we finally got it hooked up to the television, made its own electronic sounds, of course. The iconic music of Super Mario World filled the living room later that day, but that was different. It came after the main event. It was a sound we all heard together. We would gather on the couch and listen, watch him play. It was yet another shared experience. Today, technology allows us to give our children entire worlds. Worlds that fit in their hands. Worlds with stunning sound design and endless adventure. But they are, so often, worlds they inhabit alone. The gift of a private world, by its very nature, encourages a private experience. I don't want to sound like I'm saying it was better, only that it was different. And that difference is worth remembering. The sound of Christmas morning in 1993 was the sound of connection. It was loud and messy and gloriously inefficient. It was the sound of us, all of us, together, making a racket. And I have to say, listening to the quiet hum of the servers that now deliver our Christmas wishes, I find myself missing that beautiful, beautiful noise. After the letter was sent, a different kind of quiet settled over the house. The intense, focused energy of wishing was done. The lobbying and circling in the catalog subsided. The case had been made, the appeal filed with the highest authority. Now all that was left was the waiting. And that waiting period, those few weeks between the mailing of the letter and the arrival of Christmas Eve, had its own unique texture. It was a time of simmering, a low, constant heat of anticipation under everything. Every day felt like a step up a long staircase, and we all knew, without needing to say it, where the staircase led. And then, finally, you would wake up one morning and know you were on the last step. It was December the 24th, Christmas Eve. The air in the house on Christmas Eve was different. I swear you could feel it on your skin. It was thicker, charged with a kind of static electricity, of pure joy and impatience. It wasn't a calm day. Calm was for Christmas Day itself, the quiet aftermath of the storm. Christmas Eve was the storm. It was a day of beautiful, controlled chaos, a crescendo building towards the silence of midnight. The day's soundtrack began in the kitchen. Long before the radio was even switched on, the percussion was provided by Eleanor. The rhythmic thump of a wooden spoon against the side of a mixing bowl, the metallic scrape of a spatula on a cookie sheet, the crisp, tearing sound of wax paper being pulled from its box. These were the opening notes of the symphony. By 1993, our traditions were set in stone. Christmas Eve Day was for baking, not the complicated fruitcakes or puddings. Those had been made weeks earlier and were now aging peacefully in the pantry. This was for the immediate, the urgent, the sugar cookies that David would decorate, the gingerbread men, the peanut butter blossoms that had to have the chocolate kiss pressed into their center the moment they came out of the oven. Still soft and hot, the whole house smelled of it. A warm, sweet fog of cinnamon, ginger, and melting butter that seeped into the curtains and the carpets. It was a smell that said, "Today is not a normal day." And while Eleanor commanded the kitchen, my domain was elsewhere. I was the quartermaster of last-minute logistics. My chief duty was wrapping. We had a system. The big, important gifts from Santa were, of course, never wrapped. They would appear, as if by magic, assembled and ready under the tree on Christmas morning. But the gifts from us, from aunts and uncles, from grandparents, those needed wrapping. And inevitably, there were a few I'd left to the last minute. I would set up my station on the living room floor, often trying to do it while David was occupied, which was a fool's errand. The rustle of the paper, the satisfying asterisk, snick asterisk of the scissors gliding through a long sheet, the infuriating search for the end of the Scotch tape roll. These sounds were a siren's call to him. "What's that, Dad? Is that for me? Can I see?" "This is for your Aunt Carol," I'd say, trying to shield the box with my body. "You wouldn't be interested. It was a delicate dance of concealment and diversion. The papers themselves were glorious, not the elegant single-pattern rolls you see today. We had the multi-packs of folded paper creased into squares with cartoon Santas, reindeer with goofy grins, snowmen in top hats. The challenge was always trying to wrap something in a paper that was just a little too small, piecing it together with tape and a strategically placed bow. It was an art form born of necessity, and through all this activity, weaving through the smells of baking and the sounds of wrapping, was the constant unifying presence of the radio. In our house, it was the big console stereo in the living room, a piece of furniture in its own right. On Christmas Eve morning, it would be turned on and tuned to the local AM station that played nothing but Christmas music all day long. Not a playlist, not an algorithm. A real, live human being, a DJ with a warm, slightly corny voice, would be our guide for the day. That was Burl Ives with a holiday classic, he'd announce. And coming up after the break, we've got some Bing Crosby for you. But first, a word from Henderson's Hardware, having a fantastic sale on snow shovels. Don't get caught unprepared. You couldn't skip the ads. You couldn't thumb down the songs you didn't like. You were on a journey with everyone else in town who was tuned to that same station. You were hearing Feliz Navidad at the exact same moment as the lady at the grocery store, the fellow filling his car with gas, the family in the house across the street. It was a shared current, a river of sound that flowed through the whole community. When Nat King Cole's voice came on, rich and smooth as velvet, singing about chestnuts roasting on an open fire, everything would seem to pause for a moment. Eleanor would stop stirring. I'd stop fumbling with the tape. We would just listen. Some songs demanded that respect. They were pillars of the season. David, meanwhile, was a vessel of pure, unadulterated energy. He couldn't contain it. He vibrated with it. He would run from the kitchen, where he'd helped Eleanor by getting flour on his nose, to the living room, where he'd help me by trying to stick bows on the dog. He was a whirlwind of questions. Is Santa on his way yet? He's still getting the sleigh ready, buddy. It's a long trip. How will he know I've been good? He knows. That's his whole job. Will he eat the cookies we leave? Every last crumb. Especially if they're the ones you decorated. As the afternoon light began to fade, casting long blue shadows on the snow outside, the energy in the house would shift. The frantic preparations would wind down. The cookies were cooling on racks. The last of the presents were wrapped and hidden away. The next phase was beginning. This was the magical time. The gloaming of Christmas Eve. This was when we would turn off the overhead lights and plug in the Christmas tree. That moment was always a quiet miracle. The sudden bloom of soft-colored light from those big, old-fashioned C9 bulbs. They threw off a warmth you could feel, painting the walls with gentle splotches of red, green, blue, and yellow. The whole room would be transformed, softened, made holy by that light. We would eat a simple dinner, another tradition, something easy that Eleanor could prepare without much fuss. Usually a big pot of soup and some sandwiches. We'd eat it on trays in the living room, in the glow of the tree. The radio would still be playing, but the DJ's voice seemed softer now, more reverent. He was playing the carols now. Silent night. Oh, holy night. The sacred songs for the sacred part of the evening. And then, the final, most crucial ritual of the day. Preparing for the visitor. David would take this job with a seriousness that was almost comical in its intensity. He would select the very best of the cookies he had decorated, the ones with the most sprinkles, the ones that weren't slightly burned. He would arrange them on a special plate, the one with the poinsettias painted on it that we only used once a year. He would pour a glass of milk, being careful not to spill a drop. And then the carrots for the reindeer, a gesture of consideration for the animals, which Eleanor had always insisted upon. He would carry the offering to the fireplace and set it down carefully on the hearth. "There," he'd say, dusting his hands like a job well done. "Now he'll have a good snack." Getting him to bed was the final challenge. It was like trying to bottle lightning. He was too excited, too wired. His mind was racing with visions of sleigh bells and reindeer. He'd be in his pajamas, tucked into bed, but his eyes would be wide open, staring at the ceiling. "I can't sleep, Dad. You have to try. He won't come until you're asleep. It's the most important rule." This was the great paradox of Christmas Eve for a child. The one night you most wanted to stay awake was the one night you absolutely had to be asleep. I would read him. 'Twas the night before Christmas, from the same worn copy we read every year. His eyelids would get heavy, but he would fight it. Eventually, though, the long, exciting day would win. His breathing would deepen and slow, and he would finally be gone, sailing in the deep, quiet seas of sleep. Eleanor and I would stand in his doorway for a moment, watching him. The house, for the first time all day, was utterly silent. The radio was off. The kitchen was clean. The only sound was the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the whisper of the furnace. And now our Christmas Eve began. This was the secret time, the adult time. We were the magicians, the stage hands, the ones who made the whole production work. I would go to the attic, to the back of our closet, to the trunk of the car in the cold garage, all the places where the magic had been hidden, and we would bring it all into the living room. The Super Nintendo box, big and full of promise. The Lego pirate ship, its picture of high seas adventure impossibly exciting even to me. The new bicycle. We would arrange them under the tree, carefully, quietly, like we were decorating an altar. We'd fill his stocking. We'd take a single, theatrical bite out of a cookie and drink half the milk. We'd nibble the ends of the carrots. We had to complete the story. We had to provide the evidence. When we were finished, we would stand back and look at our work. The room was a landscape of a little boy's answered prayers, all bathed in the warm colored light of the tree. We were exhausted. We had been running all day, but it was a good tired. A deep, fulfilling ache that came from spending ourselves completely in the service of a child's joy. We would sit on the couch together, just for a minute, not saying a word, looking at the scene we had created. In that quiet moment, with the house finally still and the whole world seeming to hold its breath, that was it. That was the heart of it all. That crackling energy had finally resolved into a perfect, peaceful silence. It was Christmas, but that beautiful noise, like all things, eventually fades. The frenzy of Christmas morning has a natural lifespan. It burns brightly, fiercely, and then it settles into glowing embers. By midday, the storm of wrapping paper has passed, leaving a colorful, crinkled drift in the corner of the living room. The new toys have been put through their initial, rigorous paces. The Lego pirate ship has been assembled, its tiny plastic cannons aimed at the family dog. The Super Nintendo has been christened, the theme music for Super Mario World becoming a new, cheerful part of the house's soundscape, and a certain quiet settles in. Not an empty quiet, but a full one. A quiet of contentment. David would be lying on his stomach on the floor, deeply engrossed in his new world. The quiet clicks of the video game controller, the only sign of his intense concentration. The house would take a breath. The wild, magical energy of the pre-dawn hours would mellow into the warm, lazy hum of Christmas afternoon. This was the intermission, the peaceful lull between the morning's private family celebration and the evening's grand gathering. And during this lull, the day's second act would be slowly, quietly beginning to stir. The aromas drifting from the kitchen began to change. The sweet, sharp scent of sugar and ginger from the morning's baking was gradually replaced by something deeper, richer, more complex. The savory promise of roasting turkey, the earthy smell of potatoes boiling on the stove, the fragrant trinity of celery, onion, and sage for the stuffing. Eleanor moved around the kitchen with a calm, practiced grace, her movements a quiet choreography of preparation. The gentle clatter of a pot lid, the rhythmic thud of a knife on a cutting board, the low hum of the oven. These were the sounds of the coming feast. And then the doorbell would ring. That sound would cut through the afternoon peace and signal the start of the next movement. It was the arrival of the reinforcements. My parents, Eleanor's sister Carol, and her husband Frank. The front door would swing open, and a blast of cold, clean December air would rush into the house, carrying with it the scent of snow and pine. And with it came the noise of family. "Merry Christmas!" The voices would boom through the hall, a chorus of greetings overlapping one another. Boots would be stamped on the welcome mat, coats would be shed, revealing festive sweaters. There were hugs, cheeks still cold from the outdoors pressed against yours. There were gifts being exchanged, smaller, more personal tokens than the morning's grand haul. A bottle of wine for us, A new scarf for my mother, a book for my father. David, pulled from his digital world by the commotion, would run to the door, his face alight with a new kind of excitement. The joy of presence was a singular, intense thing. The joy of seeing his grandparents, his aunt and uncle, was a broader, warmer glow. The house, which had fallen into a comfortable quiet, was suddenly filled to the brim with life again. The murmur of conversation started immediately, a dozen different threads weaving together. My father asking me about the car, my mother cooing over how much David had grown, Eleanor and her sister catching up in the kitchen over the bubbling pots. It was a happy chaos, a rising tide of affection and familiarity that lifted the spirits of the whole house. And it all built towards one moment, the call from the dining room. "Dinner's ready." We didn't use the dining room much. It was a room for occasions, for moments that needed to be marked as special. And on Christmas, it was transformed. Eleanor would have laid out the good tablecloth, the one with the embroidered holly leaves that only saw the light of day once a year. The good china with its delicate gold rim, the silverware that felt heavy and important in your hand. The whole room seemed to glow, lit by candles that cast flickering shadows on the walls. And then came the food, carried out in a grand procession. The turkey, glistening and golden brown, placed in the center of the table like a king on his throne. The bowls of mashed potatoes, fluffy and white. The stuffing, the gravy, the bright green beans, the ruby red cranberry sauce. It was a feast for the eyes before it was a feast for the stomach. A landscape of abundance and care. We would all find our seats. The scraping of chairs, a brief, discordant sound before we all settled. For a moment, we would just sit there, looking at the food, at the glowing candles, at each other. And then my father would clear his throat, and we would bow our heads. He'd say a short, simple grace, his voice steady and calm, thanking God for the food, for the family, for the gift of being together. And once the Amen was spoken, the true feast would begin. Not the feast of turkey and potatoes, but the feast of conversation. And this is the part I remember most clearly. This is the memory that feels most distant now. As the plates were passed around the table, the talk would begin in earnest. There was no agenda, no single topic. It was a living, breathing thing, a conversation that flowed and eddied like a river. Uncle Frank would start with one of his terrible jokes, and the groans were just as much a part of the tradition as the laughter. My father would tell a story about a Christmas when he was a boy, a story we'd all heard a dozen times before, but we listened as if it were the first. He'd talk about getting a single orange in his stocking and feeling like the richest kid in the world. And we'd all marvel at how much things had changed. My mother would ask David about school, and she would really listen to his answer, asking him about his friends, his teacher, what book he was reading. He wasn't just a child to be seen and not heard. He was a participant, a member of the circle. Eleanor and her sister would talk about their work, about their plans for the new year. The only sounds were the sounds of us, the clink of forks against plates, the pouring of wine into glasses, and our voices, the sound of our voices weaving in and out of each other. We would talk over each other sometimes, interrupt with an excited thought, finish each other's sentences. But most importantly, we were all looking at each other. My father, telling his story, would make eye contact with each person at the table. When my mother asked David a question, her gaze was fixed on him, her attention undivided. There was nothing else competing for that attention. There were no screens at the table. There were no phones in our pockets, buzzing with notifications from a world outside that room. For that hour or hour and a half, that dining room was the entire world. All that mattered were the people sitting around that table, the stories, the laughter, the shared memories, the simple act of being together. That was the main course. The food was just the delicious excuse that brought us there. The laughter was the best part. A real deep belly laugh that would start with one person and spread around the table until we were all wiping tears from our eyes over some silly remark. It was the sound of pure, unmediated connection. I think of our Christmas dinners now. So much is the same. We still use the good china. My daughter makes a wonderful turkey. My grandson, Leo, sits in the same seat David used to. But the texture of the moment is different. The silence is different. The phones are on the table, or just beside it. They lie there like little black stones, inert but full of potential energy. And their gravity is immense. The river of conversation that once flowed so freely now hits these little dams. It stutters. Someone's phone will buzz, and their eyes will flick down just for a second. An unconscious, automatic gesture. But in that second, they have left the room. Their attention has been teleported somewhere else. A story will be interrupted while someone quickly fact-checks a detail on Google. A shared laugh will be cut short when someone decides this is a moment that needs to be captured, and the table freezes, holding smiles. For a photo that will be posted online for people who aren't there. We show each other videos. We read headlines aloud. We are all physically present, but our minds are in 100 different places. The conversation is no longer a flowing river. It's a series of disconnected ponds. We talk for a bit. Then someone drifts away into their own digital world, scrolling, tapping, and then they drift back. The silences which in 1993 were filled with the pleasant chewing of food or a moment of contented thought are now often filled with the faint blue glow of a screen held just below the tabletop. And I see the cost of this. We trade depth for breadth. We trade the single shared experience for a dozen individual shallow ones. We've become so accustomed to constant stimulation that the simple, slow, and sometimes awkward reality of an unmediated human conversation can feel lacking. It is no one's fault. It is the world we have built. It is a world of incredible connection. A world where I can see photos of relatives across the country in an instant. There is a magic in that too. But I worry that in our rush to connect with everyone, everywhere, all the time, we've forgotten how to connect with the people who are right here, right now, sitting across the table from us. The greatest gift you can give another person is the purity of your attention. It is a gift that is becoming rarer and more precious every year. And as I sit at our modern Christmas table, surrounded by the quiet hum of a dozen tiny computers, I miss the feast we used to have. Not the turkey, not the stuffing. I miss the feast of voices. I miss the sound of a family fully, completely, and utterly present. I miss the beautiful, glorious noise of just us. The plates would be cleared, but no one was in a rush. The carrying of dishes back to the kitchen was a slow, contented procession, a ritual of conclusion. We were all full, not just of turkey and stuffing, but full of warmth, of wine, of each other's company. The feeling was a pleasant weight, a kind of happy lethargy that settled deep in your bones. The kitchen would become a place of quiet collaboration. My mother and Eleanor's sister rinsing plates, Eleanor carefully packing away leftovers into containers, Frank drying with a dish towel slung over his shoulder, all while the low murmur of conversation continued. It was a seamless transition, the work just an extension of the fellowship. And then, one by one, we would migrate, drawn by an invisible current towards the heart of the house, towards the soft glow of the living room. The candles in the dining room would be blown out, leaving the scent of warm wax hanging in the air, and we'd leave that formal space behind, retreating to the comfort of the worn armchairs and the deep, welcoming sofa. This was my favorite time of the entire day. The great peak of the Christmas feast was over. The frantic energy of the morning was a distant memory. What was left was the long, gentle, downward slope of the afternoon, easing into evening. The light outside the windows began to change, the bright, crisp winter sun softening into a hazy, golden glow that cast long shadows across the snow. The world was slowing down, and so were we. My father would settle into his armchair, the one with the slightly flattened cushion that was molded perfectly to his shape. He'd let out a soft groan of satisfaction. My mother would take her spot on the sofa, tucking her feet up underneath her. Coffee would be served, the dark, rich aroma, a perfect counterpoint to the lingering sweetness of the pumpkin pie we'd just finished. For a few minutes, the only sounds would be the soft clink of mugs on saucers and the crackle of the fire Eleanor's father, Frank, had insisted on building. And then the stories would begin. They never started with an announcement. There was no "Gather round. Everyone, I am going to tell you a story." It was always more natural than that. My father would be staring into the fire, a thoughtful look on his face, and he'd just start talking. His voice a low, gentle rumble. "This fire reminds me of the winter of 47, he might say. And just like that, we were all transported. He was the keeper of the family's history. Not the dates and the names you'd find on a family tree, but the real history, the history of skinned knees and first loves, of hard times and small triumphs. The stories were our inheritance, the threads that stitched us together. I remember one Christmas, he told us about his first real job. He'd have been about 16. He got a job delivering ice. Not in a truck, but with a horse-drawn wagon. It was a story David, who was then probably 9 or 10, just couldn't wrap his head around. "You mean, like in the olden days?" David asked, his eyes wide, his Super Mario game completely forgotten on the rug beside him. My father chuckled. "It felt pretty modern at the time, son. The Iceman was an important fella back then. People depended on you, and he would paint a picture for us with his words. We could feel the biting cold of a pre-dawn winter morning in the city. We could smell the damp hay and the warm scent of the horse, a big, steady creature named Bess. We could hear the clop of her hooves on the cobblestones and the rattle of the huge blocks of ice in the back of the wagon. He told us about the heavy leather apron he wore and the sharp metal tongs he used to grip the ice, how his hands would be numb with cold by the end of the day, but how he felt 10 feet tall, a man with a real responsibility. He told us about one particular family on his route, a widow with 3 small children, living in a tiny apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up. He said he dreaded that stop, not because of the woman, who was always kind, but because of the 4 flights of stairs he had to climb with a 50-pound block of ice on his shoulder. "Every step," he said, looking at his own hands as if he could still feel the tongs. "I was terrified I was going to slip and break my neck. Or worse, drop the ice. They couldn't have afforded another one." He told us how one day, just before Christmas, he got to her door, huffing and puffing, and the woman met him with a steaming mug in her hand. It was just hot water with a little bit of sugar and a squeeze of lemon in it. It wasn't much. It was probably all she had to offer. She just stood there, my father said, his voice softer now. And she said, "You're a good boy, working so hard. You warm yourself up before you go back out. I'll tell you, I've had fancier drinks in my life, but nothing has ever tasted as good as that cup of hot water. It wasn't about the drink, it was about being seen, about a person recognizing your effort." He would pause then, and we would all be silent. imagining this 16-year-old version of our father, our grandfather, standing in a dim hallway, warming his frozen hands on a simple mug. In that silence, a lesson was passed down. Not a lecture, but a story. A story about dignity, about kindness, about the value of hard work, and the importance of acknowledging the humanity in others. David didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there on the floor, looking at his grandfather. He was seeing him not just as the old man in the armchair, but as the boy on the ice wagon. The story had built a bridge between them. A bridge across 50 years of time. That's what those afternoons were. They were bridge-building sessions. My Uncle Frank would tell stories about his time in the service, stories that weren't about combat, but about the funny characters he'd met, the strange places he'd seen. My mother would talk about growing up on the farm, about the chores she had, and the mischief she and her sister used to get into. Each story was a gift, a piece of themselves handed over for safekeeping. We were the archives. We were the living library of our family. Today, that lull after the big meal feels different. It's quieter, but it's not the same kind of quiet. It's not the quiet of listening. It's the quiet of separation. After the dishes are cleared, people still migrate to the living room. But they bring their other worlds with them. My grandson Leo will pull out his tablet. My own son David, a grown man now, will be checking work emails on his phone. My daughter will be scrolling through photos that other families have posted of their own Christmas celebrations. We are all in the same room, but we are a million miles apart. Each of us staring into our own personal glowing rectangle. The fire still crackles. The coffee is still served. The armchairs are just as comfortable. But the bridges are no longer being built. The space that was once filled with the sound of a single shared story is now filled with a dozen invisible, individual streams of data. My father is gone now, and Uncle Frank too. Their stories live on, but only in me, and in the others who were there to hear them. I try sometimes. I'll start a story. You know, your great-grandfather once told me, and they'll look up. They'll listen for a minute or two. They are good kids, they are respectful, but I can see the pull. I can feel the phantom buzz of their devices calling to them. Their attention is a currency they have to spend carefully, and a story from a long-dead relative about a world they can't imagine often feels like a poor investment compared to the instant gratification waiting for them on a screen. The silence that follows my story isn't a contemplative one. It's an empty one. A vacuum that is quickly filled by someone saying, "Hey, you guys have to see this funny video." And just like that, the moment is gone. The connection is severed. We are back in our separate worlds. I don't blame them. I truly don't. This is the world they were born into, a world that trains you to seek novelty every 15 seconds. A world where silence is something to be filled, not inhabited. But oh, what they are missing. They are missing the richness, the texture, the deep and abiding comfort of a shared narrative. They are missing the chance to see their elders not as old people, but as young, vibrant human beings who lived whole lives before they were ever born. They are missing the chance to understand that the things that truly matter, kindness, resilience, love, seeing the humanity in another person, those things don't change. The technology does, the clothes do, the jobs do. But the heart of the human experience remains the same. The stories are the proof. They are the anchor that holds us to that truth. And so I sit in the living room on Christmas afternoon, and I watch them, and I feel a profound sense of loss. Not for myself, but for them, for the inheritance they don't even know they're letting slip away. The fire crackles, the Christmas tree lights twinkle, but the most magical thing of all, the simple, powerful act of one generation telling its story to the next, that magic is fading. And I'm afraid that one day it will be gone for good. The stories would eventually run their course, like a river finding the sea. The fire in the hearth would burn down to a bed of glowing, winking embers. A pleasant weariness, the kind that only follows a day of deep contentment, would settle over the room. My father would stifle a yawn, my mother would stretch her arms. It was the signal. The long, beautiful day was finally drawing to its close. The slow, reluctant process of departure would begin. Coats were retrieved from the closet, their familiar weight a reminder of the cold world waiting outside the front door. Scarves were wrapped, boots were pulled on. There were the final, lingering hugs, the promises to call tomorrow, the last round of Merry Christmas to all. The house, which had been so full of voices and warmth, began to feel its size again as the space emptied out. We all walked them to the door, a little cluster of farewells huddled in the entryway. And as I pulled the heavy front door open, a collective, soft gasp went through our little group. It was snowing, not a fierce, wind-driven blizzard, but a silent, steady, determined fall. Huge, feathery flakes drifted down out of the inky blackness, dancing in the yellow cone of the porch light like tiny, fleeting ghosts. There was no wind. They just fell, straight down, on a mission to cover the world in a blanket of absolute peace. The air that rushed in wasn't biting. It was clean and cold and carried the unique mineral scent of snow. For a long moment, nobody spoke. We just stood there in the doorway, half in the warm, lit house, half looking out into the cold, magical dark. We watched as the flakes landed on the dark sleeves of my father's overcoat, resting there for a perfect, crystalline second before melting. We watched them gather on the railings of the porch, slowly softening the hard edges. We watched the lawn, already covered from a previous fall, receive this new layer, becoming ever deeper, ever softer. It was a shared, silent benediction. A final, unexpected gift at the end of a long and beautiful day. It was nature providing the closing credits, a gentle fade to white. "Well, look at that," my father finally said, his voice soft with wonder. "A white Christmas after all." The goodbyes were said again, but this time with a different quality. They were quieter, more hushed, as if we were all reluctant to break the spell the snow was weaving. We watched them make their way to their car, their footsteps the first to mark the fresh powder, leaving dark, sharp prints in the pristine white. We watched the car's headlights cut through the swirling flakes, the red taillights glowing softly before they turned the corner and were swallowed by the gentle storm. I closed the door, and the silence that greeted us was profound. It was a different silence from the one that had filled the house in the afternoon. That had been the quiet of contentment. This was the quiet of sanctuary. The falling snow was an insulator, a sound-dampening blanket for the entire world. The distant hum of traffic from the main road was gone. The neighbor's dog, which usually barked at anything and everything, was silent. All the sharp edges of the world outside had been muffled, muted, turned down to nothing. Eleanor and I stood in the hall for a moment, just listening to the new quality of the quiet. David came and stood between us, slipping his hand into mine. "Is Santa's sleigh going to be okay in the snow?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Santa, he knows how to handle a little snow," Eleanor said, smiling and stroking his hair. "This is his kind of weather. We didn't turn on the television. We didn't put on music. The spell was too perfect to break. We migrated back to the living room, drawn not by habit, but by the large picture window that looked out onto the front yard. Eleanor turned off all the lamps except for one, a small one in the corner that cast a warm, gentle pool of light. We didn't want the glare on the glass to interfere with the view. The only other light came from the multicolored glow of the Christmas tree lights, which reflected 1,000 tiny points of color onto the dark window pane. And we just sat, and we watched. It is one of the purest, simplest pleasures I have ever known. To sit in a warm, safe room and watch the snow fall. The world I knew, the familiar neighborhood street with its houses, its cars, its sidewalks, was being transformed, minute by minute, into something new and strange and beautiful. The roof of the neighbor's car became a soft white mound. The sharp, bare branches of the oak tree in our yard gathered the snow, outlining themselves in brilliant white against the dark sky. The streetlights wore little white caps, and the light they cast was no longer harsh, but diffused and hazy, creating great glowing halos in the thickening air. There was a rhythm to it, a slow, hypnotic dance that quieted the mind. There was nothing to do, no calls to make, no errands to run. The snow was an excuse, a permission slip from the universe to simply stop, to be still. The world outside was shutting down, and so we could too. We were disconnected, not by choice, not by turning off a device, but by the simple elemental fact of frozen water falling from the sky. It was a feeling of being sealed in, but not trapped. It was the feeling of being in a cocoon. The house was our warm, safe shell, and outside, the world was being remade. David had knelt on the sofa, his elbows on the back and his chin in his hands, his face pressed close to the cold glass. He was utterly captivated. He wasn't thinking about his new video games or his Lego pirates. He was present in a way that children so effortlessly are, completely absorbed by the silent spectacle outside. I watched him, and I felt a sense of peace so profound, it was almost a physical presence in the room. This, I thought, this is everything. This quiet moment, this feeling of absolute security, of being buffered from all the noise and worry of the world. This is the heart of it all. I think about what happens now when it snows. That feeling of peaceful disconnection is so much harder to find. It's almost impossible. The moment the first flake falls, our first instinct isn't to watch. It's to report, to document. We pull out our phones, we take a picture, we shoot a little video of the snow falling past the porch light. We post it. It's snowing, we announce to our hundreds of digital friends. We add a filter, a hashtag. We turn the experience into content, and then the information starts to pour in. It's not a mystery anymore. It's a data stream. We open the weather app. We look at the radar, a swirling map of green and blue. We see projections, 2 inches by 10 p.m., another 4 to 6 overnight. We get notifications from the local news. Winter storm warning in effect. We check the town's social media page to see if there's a parking ban. We look at traffic cameras to see how the main roads are doing. A friend who lives 10 miles away texts to say it's really coming down over there. The mystery is gone. The sense of being gently cut off is replaced by a sense of being more connected than ever, but to data, not to the experience itself. We know exactly what's happening, what's going to happen, and what everyone else thinks about it. And the quiet is gone too. We don't just sit and watch the snow fall. That feels unproductive, boring even. So we put on a movie. We binge a series we've been meaning to watch. The hypnotic, silent dance of the snowflakes outside is replaced by the flashing lights and explosive sounds of a superhero battle on a giant screen. We sit in the same room, but we are in different worlds. My grandson might be watching a video on his tablet with headphones on, my daughter scrolling through her feeds, her husband answering a late-night email from his boss, who knows that a snow day doesn't mean a day off anymore. We are sealed in, but we are not together. The cocoon has been breached. The world, with all its demands, its anxieties, its endless stream of information and entertainment, comes right through the walls with us, carried in our pockets. The snow is no longer a soft buffer against the world. It's just a scenic backdrop for the same life we live every other day. I miss that buffer. I miss that feeling of being granted a temporary reprieve. In 1993, the snow didn't just cover the ground. It cleared the air. It cleared our minds. It created a space, a quiet, uncluttered space where a family could simply be with each other, sharing a single, simple, beautiful experience. There was no pressure to do anything, to capture anything, to share anything. The only requirement was to be there, to watch, to feel the warmth of the house at your back and the cold of the glass on your fingertips, to feel small and safe as the great, quiet world turned white. That night, after a while, David's head began to nod. He fell asleep right there, kneeling on the sofa, his cheek smushed against the back cushion. I carefully lifted him up. He was getting so big, a solid, heavy weight in my arms, and carried him up to his bed. Eleanor had already turned down his covers. I laid him down, and he barely stirred. Before I left his room, I stood at his window and looked out. The snow was still falling, thicker now. The world was unrecognizable, a landscape of soft, glowing shapes. There was no sound at all, just the faint sigh of my son's breathing in his sleep. I felt a deep, unshakable sense of peace. For this one night, we were completely and utterly safe. The world was far away. It couldn't touch us. And that feeling, that perfect, simple, snow-bound peace, is a memory I treasure more than any gift that was ever under the tree. They never started with an announcement. There was no, "Gather round, everyone, I'm going to tell you a story." It was always more natural than that. My father would be staring into the fire, a thoughtful look on his face, and he'd just start talking, his voice a low, gentle rumble. "This fire reminds me of the winter of '47, he might say. And just like that, we were all transported. He was the keeper of the family's history. Not the dates and the names you'd find on a family tree, but the real history. The history of skinned knees and first loves, of hard times and small triumphs. The stories were our inheritance, the threads that stitched us together. I remember one Christmas, he told us about his first real job. He'd have been about 16. He got a job delivering ice. Not in a truck, but with a horse-drawn wagon. It was a story David, who was then probably 9 or 10, just couldn't wrap his head around. "You mean, like, in the olden days?" David asked, his eyes wide, his Super Mario game completely forgotten on the rug beside him. My father chuckled, a deep, warm sound that seemed to come from his chest. It felt pretty modern at the time, son. The Iceman was an important fella back then. People depended on you, and he would paint a picture for us with his words. We could feel the biting cold of a pre-dawn winter morning in the city. We could smell the damp hay and the warm scent of the horse, a big, steady creature named Bess. We could hear the clop of her hooves on the cobblestones and the rattle of the huge blocks of ice in the back of the wagon. He told us about the heavy leather apron he wore and the sharp metal tongs he used to grip the ice, how his hands would be numb with cold by the end of the day, but how he felt 10 feet tall, a man with a real responsibility. He told us about one particular family on his route, a widow with 3 small children, living in a tiny apartment on the 4th floor of a walk-up. He said he dreaded that stop, not because of the woman, who was always kind, but because of the 4 flights of stairs he had to climb with a 50-pound block of ice on his shoulder. Every step, he said, looking at his own hands as if he could still feel the tongs. I was terrified I was going to slip and break my neck, or worse, drop the ice. They couldn't have afforded another one. He told us how one day, just before Christmas, he got to her door, huffing and puffing, and the woman met him with a steaming mug in her hand. It was just hot water with a little bit of sugar and a squeeze of lemon in it. It wasn't much. It was probably all she had to offer. She just stood there. My father said, his voice softer now. And she said, "You're a good boy, working so hard. You warm yourself up before you go back out. I'll tell you, I've had fancier drinks in my life, but nothing has ever tasted as good as that cup of hot water." It wasn't about the drink. It was about being seen, about a person recognizing your effort. He would pause then, and we would all be silent, imagining this 16-year-old version of our father, our grandfather, standing in a dim hallway, warming his frozen hands on a simple mug. In that silence, a lesson was passed down. Not a lecture, but a story about dignity, about kindness, about the value of hard work, and the importance of acknowledging the humanity in others. David didn't say anything for a long time. He just sat there on the floor, looking at his grandfather. He was seeing him not just as the old man in the armchair, but as the boy on the ice wagon. The story had built a bridge between them, a bridge across 50 years of time. That's what those afternoons were. They were bridge-building sessions. My Uncle Frank would tell stories about his time in the service, stories that weren't about combat, but about the funny characters he'd met, the strange places he'd seen. My mother would talk about growing up on the farm, about the chores she had, and the mischief she and her sister used to get into. Each story was a gift, a piece of themselves handed over for safekeeping. We were the archives. We were the living library of our family. Today, that lull after the big meal feels different. It's quieter, but it's not the same kind of quiet. It's not the quiet of listening. It's the quiet of separation. After the dishes are cleared, people still migrate to the living room, but they bring their other worlds with them. My grandson Leo will pull out his tablet. My own son David, a grown man now, will be checking work emails on his phone. My daughter will be scrolling through photos that other families have posted of their own Christmas celebrations, comparing, contrasting, a silent competition she doesn't even realize she's in. We are all in the same room, but we are 1,000,000 miles apart, each of us staring into our own personal glowing rectangle. The fire still crackles. The coffee is still served. The armchairs are just as comfortable. But the bridges are no longer being built. The space that was once filled with the sound of a single, shared story is now filled with a dozen invisible, individual streams of data. My father is gone now, and Uncle Frank too. Their stories live on, but only in me, and in the others who were there to hear them. I try sometimes. I'll start a story. You know, your great-grandfather once told me, and they'll look up. They'll listen for a minute or two. They are good kids. They are respectful. But I can see the pull. I can feel the phantom buzz of their devices calling to them. Their attention is a currency they have to spend carefully. And a story from a long-dead relative about a world they can't imagine often feels like a poor investment compared to the instant gratification waiting for them on a screen. Their eyes might be on me, but their minds are elsewhere, waiting for the polite interval to pass so they can return to their real focus. The silence that follows my story isn't a contemplative one. It's an empty one. A vacuum that is quickly filled by someone saying, "Hey, you guys have to see this funny video." And just like that, the moment is gone. The connection is severed. A phone is passed around. We all watch a 30-second clip of a cat falling off a counter. We share a brief, shallow laugh, and then we are back in our separate worlds. I don't blame them. I truly don't. This is the world they were born into. A world that trains you to seek novelty every 15 seconds. A world where silence is something to be filled, not inhabited. Where every experience is meant to be captured and shared, not simply lived. But oh, what they are missing. They are missing the richness, the texture, the deep and abiding comfort of a shared narrative. They are missing the chance to see their elders not as old people, but as young, vibrant human beings who lived whole lives before they were ever born. They are missing the chance to understand that the things that truly matter, kindness, resilience, love, seeing the humanity in another person, those things don't change. The technology does, the clothes do, the jobs do. But the heart of the human experience remains the same. The stories are the proof. They are the anchor that holds us to that truth. Without them, we're adrift. We just float on the surface of the present moment with no real depth beneath us. And so I sit in the living room on Christmas afternoon, and I watch them, and I feel a profound sense of loss. Not for myself, but for them, for the inheritance they don't even know they're letting slip away. The fire crackles, the Christmas tree lights twinkle, but the most magical thing of all, the simple, powerful act of one generation telling its story to the next, that magic is fading. And I'm afraid that one day, when I'm gone, it will be gone for good. There will be terabytes of photos and videos, a perfect digital record of every holiday, but the soul of those days, the voices in the firelight, will be silent. And perhaps that is the inevitable path of things. A tradition, no matter how beloved, is like a voice. And a voice, without anyone left to speak the words, must eventually fall silent. I've sat with that thought on more than one Christmas afternoon in recent years, a quiet ache in my chest that has nothing to do with the richness of the meal or the passage of time. It's a feeling of being a custodian of ghosts, a curator of memories that have no home to go to once I am gone. The world moves on, and it does not seem to have much use for stories about ice wagons and cups of sweetened water. It has its own stories, millions of them, flashing by at the speed of light, forgotten as soon as they are seen. I watched them one Christmas, not so long ago. My family, my legacy, gathered in my home. And I felt that familiar, melancholy pang. The room was warm, filled with the scent of pine and cinnamon, but a strange chill had settled over me. It was the chill of obsolescence. There sat my son, David, a good man, a loving father, his brow furrowed in concentration as his thumbs moved over the glass of his phone. My daughter-in-law was smiling softly at her own screen, and my grandson, Leo, was in his own world, a pair of headphones covering his ears, his face illuminated by the shifting colors of his tablet. They were here, but they were not here. Not with me, not with each other. They were physically present, but their consciousness, their attention, was fractured, scattered to the digital winds. And the thought came to me, sharper and sadder than ever before. It's over. The long, unbroken chain of shared experience, the simple act of being in a room together and weaving a single tapestry of memory, it has been severed. We are now a collection of islands, each of us experiencing our own private Christmas. And the house is just the sea we happen to be floating in. I must have sighed. A small, involuntary sound of resignation. Leo, my grandson, looked up. He pulled one side of his headphones off. "You okay, Grandpa?" he asked. The music spilling from the earpiece was a chaotic jumble of electronic beats, a language I couldn't begin to understand. "I'm fine, son, just thinking." "Oh," he said, and for a moment I thought he would put the headphone back on, retreating into his world. But he didn't. He turned his tablet towards me. "Look," he said, a grin spreading across his face. On the screen was the face of a woman, her hair white and her face a road map of wrinkles I knew as well as my own. It was Eleanor's sister, Carol, who lived 1,000 miles away and hadn't been well enough to travel for years. She was wearing a ridiculous paper crown from a Christmas cracker and holding up a half-eaten gingerbread man. "Grandma Carol says this one looks like you," Leo said, pointing to the cookie. "Because he's missing a leg." Carol's voice, tinny and crackling through the small speaker, came through. "It's true, Arthur. He's got your distinguished limp." And she let out a cackle of a laugh that I hadn't heard in person for almost a decade, but that I recognized as instantly as my own name. Leo laughed with her, a pure, uninhibited kid's laugh, and in that moment, seeing my grandson's face next to his great-aunt's, the two of them separated by a continent, but sharing a joke in real time, something inside me shifted. The cold, hard judgment I had been holding began to soften, to thaw at the edges. I had been so busy mourning the silence of the old way that I had failed to listen to the sounds of the new. My gaze drifted from Leo to his mother. She was still on her phone, typing intently. But I looked closer now. I saw she was in a group chat with all her cousins, the one who lived in Ireland, the one in Australia. They were all sharing photos of their Christmas trees, of their children opening gifts. My daughter-in-law was carefully adding a photo she had taken of us all at dinner just an hour before. "Merry Christmas from our table to yours," she wrote. "Missing you all. It wasn't a competition. It wasn't a performance. It was a thread thrown across oceans and time zones. A simple, heartfelt attempt to pull the scattered strands of her family a little closer together on this one day. It was, in its own way, a story told in pixels instead of words, but a story of family nonetheless. Then I looked at my son, David, my boy, who I had carried to bed on that snowy night in 1993. He was still staring at his phone, but his expression had changed. It was softer now. He tapped the screen a few times, then put it down and looked up, meeting my eyes. "Just finished," he said with a small smile. "Everything all right at work?" I asked, trying to keep the old man's disapproval out of my voice. "It wasn't work," he said. He seemed to guess at my thoughts. "It was Mark." Mark was a junior colleague of his, a young man whose family lived overseas. He's all alone today. I just ordered him a proper Christmas dinner from that Italian place he likes. It'll be there in an hour. He shrugged, a little embarrassed. It's not much, but I didn't want him to be eating ramen out of a pot on Christmas Day. And there it was, as clear and as potent as my father's story about the Iceman. It was the cup of hot water offered in a different century, through a different medium. It was the simple, profound act of seeing someone, of recognizing their humanity and their need. David hadn't stood in a cold hallway. He had sat in a warm living room. He hadn't handed over a steaming mug. He had tapped on a screen. But the impulse, the generosity, the fundamental kindness at the heart of the act, it was identical. It was an echo, so clear and so true that it almost took my breath away. I had been a fool. I had been looking for Christmas in the forms I recognized, in the traditions of my youth. I was waiting for a story to be told, aloud, for a connection to be made through eye contact and shared silence. I was so fixated on the familiar shape of the vessel that I had failed to see that the contents were still there. The spirit hadn't vanished. It had simply poured itself into new containers. The spirit of togetherness wasn't just in the room anymore. It was in the video call that bridged 1,000 miles, allowing a great aunt to tease her grandnephew about a cookie. The spirit of family history wasn't just in the spoken tale. It was in the digital album being shared across continents, a modern-day fireside gathering of scattered clans. And the spirit of generosity, of caring for your fellow man, was in the quiet, unassuming tap of a finger that sent a warm meal to a lonely soul. All the essential elements were there. Love, connection, empathy, generosity. They hadn't died. They had adapted. They had learned to speak a new language, a language of bandwidth and fiber optics, of texts and of posts. It wasn't the language I was fluent in, and maybe it felt less tangible, less real to me. But for my children and my grandchild, it was their native tongue. And they were using it to say the same things my father's generation said, with their actions and their stories. I looked around the room again. It no longer felt like a collection of islands. It felt like a communications hub, a base station from which feelings of love and connection were being broadcast. We were not isolated from each other. We were each tending to a different branch of our shared family tree, nurturing the connections that time and distance had tried to weaken. The fundamental spirit of Christmas has always been about a light shining in the darkness. For my father, the darkness was a literal cold, and the light was the warmth of a simple kindness. For us now, the darkness is different. It's the darkness of distance, of busyness, of the overwhelming noise of modern life that can make us feel so isolated and alone. And the light is still there. It just shines from a screen now. It's an echo. That's what it is. My father's stories, the memory of that silent, falling snow, the feeling of being safe and together. They are not gone. They are the original sound, and the things I was seeing in my living room were their echoes, bouncing back to me in a new form. The echo may sound different from the original call, its edges softened, its tone altered by the surfaces it has traveled across, but the message is the same. It is a message of love, of hope, of togetherness. You just have to be willing to listen in a new way. You have to quiet your own expectations and listen for the resonance, for the familiar feeling beneath the unfamiliar sound. It's still there. It has always been there. And I suspect it always will be.